Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on January 30th, 2023. We are now live on YouTube. I'll start with roll call of council. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
And Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. Can I get a motion that council reconvenes in open session, please? Moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Just going to open something here. I'm going to start by acknowledging the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Chinatan, also called the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. So yesterday on January 29th in 2017, a gunman barged into a mosque and massacred 6 Muslims and targeted many more as they prayed in a mosque. The shooting left 17 children fatherless, 6 women widowed, and 6 victims severely injured, including 1 paralyzed for life. We also lost a first responder due to the trauma of the attack. The killer was consumed by an unspeakable amount of hate for Muslims. This hate is all too well known by Muslims who experience Islamophobia in their everyday lives. The horrific attack in London several years ago reiterated the fact that Islamophobia is not a thing of the past, but very much alive and present in our communities even today. The township lowered our flags to half-mast in remembrance of this tragic anniversary, along with the region and other area municipalities. Let's take a moment to pause and reflect and consider what we can do, not just as individuals, but as a collective, to address Islamophobia and hatred of any kind now and in the future. Let's take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Are there disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Burgess?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest for item number DS04 2023 for agricultural enforcement status and direction, as I have extended family involved in the process.
Thank you. We have one item to come forward from closed session this evening, and that is the Woolwich Environmental Advisory Committee appointments for 2022 to 2026. That's incorrect. It's the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee appointments. Sorry about that. Appointments. So we appoint the following applicants to the committee for a 4-year term ending December 31st, 2026. And that would be Alyssa Cleland, Tamara Cooper, Sarah Cunneyworth, Heather Gillespie, Christine Nishawaki, Farshid Sadat Sharafi, Catherine Waybrandt, and the Brain Injury Association of Waterloo, Wellington. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We have minutes from December 12th council, special council budget minutes from January 9th, special council minutes from January 9th, special council budget minutes from January 12th, January 16th, January 19th, and committee of the whole from January 23rd. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I went through that quickly, Council. If there's any concerns with any of the minutes, I should have maybe given you an opportunity for that. I'm assuming everyone was fine with it since you voted in favor. We have a public meeting. The following portion of the meeting is for information only, and no decisions will be made tonight. Any questions can be directed to Development Services staff following the meeting. I declare the planning public meeting to be open, and this is zone change 3/2023 and draft plan of subdivision 30T20702 Old Scout Limited and 1065 Old Scout Place, St. Jacobs. And I will turn the meeting over to David Gundrum. The meeting is yours for now, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Shantz, members of council. I'll try to keep it brief, knowing that we have the consultant for this proposal on hand tonight, and Ms. Sarah Code will be giving a presentation following my remarks on this development. So just to summarize, this is a proposal for a new plan of subdivision for 12 semi-detached units at 1065 Old Scout Place, and this property is located at the southern extent of the urban boundary of the town of St. Jacobs. It's formerly a former salvage yard, which has since been remediated and cleaned up. The record of site condition having been registered with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. The proposed zoning change would see the zoning migrated from the agricultural zone to the R5A zone to permit the intended development for the 12 semi-detached units on the site, as well as site-specific provisions to permit reduced lot width and lot frontage of approximately 8.375 meters, whereas the R5A requires a lot frontage and lot width of 9 meters. The application has been circulated to members of the public within the prescribed circulation distance under the Planning Act, as well as public agencies and township departments for comments. Staff will prepare a recommendation report for council's consideration following tonight's meeting at a future date of council once all representations have been known and been considered. So I'll end at that point and turn it back over to the chair. And thank you for your time, council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No, I'm not seeing any questions. I'll ask the clerk if there are any unregistered participants in the meeting.
Mayor Shantz, we do also have consultant Sarah Code of GSP Group to give you a presentation, but at this time we have no unregistered participants in the meeting.
Thank you. I missed that line. Ms. Code, sorry about that.
That's okay. Good evening. I'll just share my screen. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Sarah Code. I'm a planner with GSP Group, and I'm here on behalf of the owner of 1065 Old Scout Place. So the site is before you on the screen. It is approximately 0.4 hectare, just under 1 acre. It's located west of the existing Valley View subdivision. Applications for draft plan and zone change were submitted in 2020 for the site. The proposal at that time was for the development of the site for 12 townhouse units. The proposal has since changed to 12 semi-detached units. So the site is designated residential and ancillary in the township's official plan, and this designation does permit all types of residential uses. The site is currently zoned agricultural, and the zoning bylaw amendment before you this evening proposes to rezone the site to the R5A zone, which would permit semi-detached dwellings on the site. And as David mentioned, there is one site-specific zoning regulation being requested, which is to permit a minimum lot frontage of 8.375 meters, whereas 9 meters is required. So this zone change would realize the continuation of low density residential uses along Old Scout Place and would implement the current official plan designation, which looks to see residential uses on the site. This is the draft plan, which would ultimately realize 13 lots with the building footprints overlaid on the draft plan. So it depicts the building footprints. Each unit would have generous rear yards at approximately 14 meters each, and also generous front yards, which would allow for landscaping. So with the exception of the reduced lot frontage, all other sites, regulations of the R5A zone would be met. This is a depiction of the proposed building elevations. There's still some refinement to these elevations being made based on detailed grading. There may be some additional steps up to the front door, but this gives you an idea of what the buildings will look like once constructed. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the consultant. I'm just wondering if you could provide a little bit of insight as to why the plan was changed from townhouses to semi-detached units.
Yeah, absolutely. So it came down to a water supply issue for firefighting for the proposed townhouse issues. So because the site is on the outskirts of St. Jacobs, there isn't enough existing water supply to be able to provide the required firefighting flow for those townhouse units. And that was determined after the public meeting in 2020. So the engineer did a lot of work to determine if they could increase the available water supply, but ultimately it was determined that that would be cost prohibitive to the development. So as after speaking with our engineers, I understand that a townhouse block has a higher total volume of water required than a single or a semi. So that is why the proposal was changed to semi-detached units. It really came down to an engineering issue. And there is no water supply issue with the semi-detached units.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We've already determined there are no unregistered participants. So if this, since this item was for information only, there are no further speakers. I declare the planning public meeting to be closed. And we have no presentations, but we do have a delegation. And before we hear from Mr. Sager, I need to read some instructions, even though I feel like I don't need to read them to you, sir. But you have a minimum of 7 minutes to speak unless council or the clerk has set a different time. There will be a timer on the screen and you will hear a warning when you have 1 minute and when your time is up. Once you are finished, please wait for questions of clarification from council. And if we don't have any, you can return to your seat. And if you wish to stay and listen to the rest of our meeting, you're welcome to do that. Or you can leave when you're finished. Council discussion and debate will start when all questions of clarification have finished. And I would like to welcome Mr. Jeff Steger from the Waterloo Federation of Agriculture to update council on the census of agriculture from the region of Waterloo. I look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Mayor Shantz, and congratulations on your and the council's election and re-election to council. And don't want to miss the fact that staff, they do a lot of hard work and make it all keep running. So good for them. We're bringing you to the census, and I'll get back to an interesting ask we have for you this tonight. And this is the whole point here was, you know, you're going to have some agricultural stuff show up over your next 4 years. And it would be just great if you had kind of like a 20,000 foot view of agriculture, just some kind of a place to start from when it comes to understanding what to do with agriculture. So our friends at the regional planning put together this lovely document, and I'd invite you to have a quick look at this and we'll go through that. And I'd like to there's a lot of information, just 4 pages. We'll look at one item per page. So with that, let's look at the very first page if you're so inclined, and that has to do with the number of farms in the Waterloo region. let's look at Woolwich. So there you are, 450 farms in 2016. 450 farms of 49,000 in the province and 193,000 in the Dominion of Canada. And you can see that even our cities, we usually think of the cities as not having farms, but they do. And it's always a great delight to watch the faces of our urban folks and they realize there's farms in their jurisdiction. I'm quite impressed with that. All right. Next page, please. The size of the farms in the Waterloo region are below what would be average for Canada, but sitting at that 1,729 level. Lots of trends in there. There's been an increase in smaller farms and some of the larger farms. Land use types of land use in the province or in the region in Woolwich, in the region of Waterloo is 74% are crops. And I'll ask you to look at the third page and what kind of farms do we have in the Waterloo region? We are good at raising livestock. And as we move forward, you know what, we have a lot of really interesting small farms come along. They got community shared agriculture. And so fruit and vegetables are just a small, interesting little niche that's continuing to grow as those growers provide something that the public is looking for. And the last page is what kind of business do they do in the Waterloo region? And in Woolwich, 2015, $187 million worth of business came from the farms. So lots of business. So, when something comes along and you need to be talking about what are you going to do with agriculture, then this might be a useful document. Now, what's good about this is it's a beautiful infographics the region puts together. Unfortunately, they have not been able to do the latest census. So this little one pager is what I would take your attention to if you could be so kind. There we go. And some of these are extensions of the existing data, but you can see on there that the farm numbers are roughly the same. And the acre of farmland doesn't change because we don't produce new farmland. It's pretty fixed. We just redesignate it. Farm size 149 acres. Look at these local farm sales. Interesting stuff there. I'm intrigued by the group, the 11 farms that operate the CSA. That's community shared agriculture, and those guys are really onto something. So they're people who support them. Help put the crop in. They put the money up front, they grow the crops, and then those people then get typically a weekly package of fruits and vegetables from that farm. And so they share in the cost of putting it in and then making sure everything it's used afterwards. It's quite an elegant way to grow things, I think. Economic activity, I'll just quickly say there that, in the region of Waterloo, I think there's between 4,000 and 5,000 people who go out every day. They milk the cows and plant the corn, and another 20,000 folks that get that product to market and do some processing. So it's a lot of stuff. $652 million in farm cash receipts in the 2020 census. It says 2021, but this is always done a year after the actual census is done. So my ask for you before we get into the final bit of the presentation is the census. You know what? You're very familiar with the census. You may use it at the township level and certainly at the regional level, like to project the absolute number of people and where the trends are going. My ask is that you do the same for agriculture. Is there something in agriculture you want to see more of that may be challenged? And how could you measure the trends leading to that, and then have some guidance on what kind of policies and economic activities you want to either encourage or to have some kind of a metric to measure agriculture. That'd be my ask, that Woolwich Township would put together an annual part of their census review that I suspect planning does already would include agriculture. And the last of my presentation, moving along quite smartly here, I'm just quite delighted. This here document, Real Dirt on Farming. So this came about because we know the public, they really are interested in farming, what we do. And this was put together to help answer those questions. And it's all the topics that most of you kind of feel that you always wondered about, treatment of animals, GMOs, all that kind of stuff. And it's also in that great infographic style. And I think I'm going to have to find myself some good OFA bookmarks so that you can take that home tonight and put that mark in there, because I know you wouldn't want to miss a single page of it. So with that, Council and Mayor and Council, that's my presentation. And if you have any questions, I brought on my notepad, and maybe as a follow-up, I'm thinking that the region will eventually get around to doing their their fine job with the census. Maybe an invitation to come back and to have an idea what kind of topics you may or may not want to talk about. I can bring those topics along. So I'm open for questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to the delegate. When looking at your presentation, I noticed that the number of beef and dairy farms have increased quite a number in Woolwich Waterloo region. Why is there so many more animal farms being produced?
So we got a great tradition of small farms in the Waterloo region. That's part of it. Also, farms are more profitable the more things you can do. So if you can be growing livestock and crops, not only are they augment each other as far as crops feed the animals, but the animal manures go back on the soil again. This is way better than bringing in fertilizers from offshore. So it's really, and we have the type of climate that supports that. Not too hot for livestock, but warm enough to grow crops at good levels, acceptable levels that are profitable. It's anecdotal, but that's a good question. Thanks.
Councillor Grant and then Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the delegate. I noticed in your census there's some information about renewable energy. Could you just speak a bit more on those? They were the areas of interest for me.
So that's a new thing. I don't think the early census had it on it, but you probably noticed that there's all kinds of solar panels on farms. And so as an operation, as a business operation, you want to maximize those things you have, which is open space for, in this case, solar panels typically. Hey, you know what? There's new stuff coming along too. Actually, I don't want to forget. There's things called biodigesters. So, if you got a big livestock operation, I think you got something here in town actually too. I think just north of you have a, so that's quite novel. You can take organic materials and turn them into a burnable gas and make energy. So this is quite cool. Other than that, I don't know if there's any other solar and bioreactors are probably what's we see, and you'll probably see more consolidation of bioreactors because they need a certain, amount of stuff coming in and also close to a gas line to put it into. So you have to have certain conditions in it to make that really make sense.
Yeah, he's referring to Elmira Bioen at the north end of town. I think you're all familiar with that. Yeah. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the delegate. I'm wondering if you could provide more clarity around the survey that you're requesting. Are you wanting us to actually go out there and survey the farmers and ask what their needs are?
No, I'm sorry, a good question. Just the census data. You have census data like you. No, I don't, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you probably take the census data now, I'm just guessing, and you can just do the math to it and have a good.
More descriptive stats to get a sense of what it is that we're looking at. And from there we would have, okay.
Yeah, so like right now, census data comes in three forms, right? You got the press release of the year of the census, then you get the more detailed stuff like we've got here. Mm-hmm. But then the really good stuff is when you got to pay money for and have people with a skill level, no statistics and the like. So no, data management's an amazing thing. If you get enough data and a big enough computer, you can draw all kinds of trends. So it would seem like the census data would be a great one to find out about agriculture. The government's collected agricultural statistics for years, and you could just, in some measure, throw that all in a big old computer and out pops trends that you always find information you couldn't see if you didn't. You can always find information or trends in data you never thought were there. So, and then make agriculture. What if we could have more business on the farm? What kind of things can you do to make sure that there's even more economic activity on farmlands? And things you want. Do you want more solar panels, or would you like more? Like how much? We already do a lot of things that are environmentally sound. Buffer strips are on waterways, decommissioning wells, cover crops. Let's get an inventory of how much is being done and how much more we could do, and capture those societal benefits that would happen with those kind of activities. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay. Thank you. Just to clarify, the proper name of the company at the north end of town is BioN Power Inc. I said it wrong. So are there other questions? No. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and we'll think about what stats we should be collecting from our agricultural sector.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite good. Like we're so lucky in the Waterloo region. My goodness, we have the best of both worlds, big cities with those kind of amenities, plus rural areas that are quieter, but also have open space. But so everyone knows about agriculture, but do they really? They don't. And so the census data is one already paid for by a taxpayer of data that we could probably use to our mutual benefit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Okay, there's no unfinished business. Before we pass a motion approving or receiving the consent agenda as a whole, does anyone on council wish to remove any items for further discussion? I think we're going to take number 12.1.1, number 4, separate from the rest, because I think that's where Councillor Burgess had a conflict of interest. Is there anything else that council wants to pull? Okay, then can I have someone move everything except for item number 4? Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And now for number 4, agricultural enforcement status and direction. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Cadeau, seconded. No one wants. Councillor Bryant will second it. I sense there may be some discussion here. Is that correct? Or would you like to call a question? Councillor Schwint?
I'd like to follow up conversations I've had over the last week on this one. I know council was concerned last week, one about liability and ensuring that properties came up to standards. And I guess I'd like to point out, based on my experience, that the township is probably the second or third organization that's going to be enforcing standards. Insurance companies are going to drive standards for safety. I know at my own property, I've had an insurance company out twice in the last 5 years as a requirement to get insurance. They're doing an inspection to make sure things are done right and properly. So I think there's other organizations or other avenues to look after the safety side of things. And as we've spent like 4 weeks now in budget, 3 weeks in budget, it's becoming a blur. We've been very concerned about the 8.5% tax increase potentially. We haven't been able to do a very good job, or let me rephrase that. We haven't identified many savings in the budget. I wonder if putting off this contract for outsourcing, looking for problems, I'm going to call it, for a year, could do 2 things. Number one, it saves $100,000 in our current operating budget, which affects the tax rate. It'll buy staff some more time as they're dealing with the implementation of bill. Help me out, someone please. You know what I'm talking about. Those 2 bills in a year, they're going to be very much overworked, and buys us time to see what the effects are of the first year of going out and looking for problems in the township. I know the other concern I heard from people was, is this fair or not? And I guess I look at it from the other point of view, not is it fair, but are we achieving what we want to achieve? And should we maybe take a pause, wait a year, save the $100,000, evaluate where we're at, and then we can see if we want to carry on with a program that's doing good things to the township, or maybe we find a program that didn't have the benefits we thought it might. So that's kind of the reason why I'm opposed to awarding this contract for this year, and I'd like to wait a year.
Anyone else? Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you to maybe Mr. Petherick. I just am wondering if we were to delay this, would it actually affect the tax rate?
Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. The way I would say it is, if you recall the staff report, the cost of this consultant was going to be offset by the increase in fees. So it was supposed to be a revenue neutral. That's the way it would be approached in the budget. I mean, there's always, a potential that, the cost may be higher than the revenue, and that would have to be factored into the overall for the actuals in 2023. But the budget itself would be cost neutral. It'd be an in with the cost and then an in with an increased fees for revenue.
Okay, thank you. Did
Thank
you have a
you.
follow-up?
Yeah, I wanted to maybe draw that point that this wouldn't necessarily be affecting the budget in a negative way or reducing that tax rate that we were maybe looking at.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant, did you have your hand up?
I did, and through you, and I'm really torn on this, both because I have an issue with paying consultants fees. I always have. Secondly, I know in my area, people are torn. Some want to see it pushed through, some don't. So it's a real catch-22 as to which way I go on this one. We do have farms in our area that are not complying, that potentially could be a liability risk, but then we have other ones that have kept everything up to snuff, and they're saying like, we don't need this. So I'm really torn on this issue.
Anyone else? Councillor Cadell?
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director Freese, I suppose. To Councillor Schwint's point, delaying a year and looking at progress that we've made over this last year. Do we have any stats into how many of these properties maybe weren't up to standards and we had to issue orders around? Were there any? Do we have numbers? Are we able to speak to those so that we get a sense on the number?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I don't know what the exact numbers are. I know that it's been taking us quite a few years just to get through that 1/3 of the township, because each of the time we find a property that's not compliant, it takes a lot of work to work with the applicant and to get them into compliance. So we expect that if we don't have this consultant, we can do it still internally with staff, but we expect that it's going to take another at least 5, probably more years to get through the rest of the township.
Councillor Grant or Councillor Cadeau, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, is
Sorry.
it possible to get some numbers on, out of the however many properties we went through, like 10% where you had some issue that needed resolution? I mean, that would just be beneficial, I think, in justifying kind of spending the 100,000, even though I know that it's kind of built on the cost recovery model, which is, one of the main reasons that I support this. I see the concern that you have around priorities and whether or not this should be that priority. And, because this could be an external consultant and because it could be fully cost recovered, I don't see it as the same level of concern. I don't see that it's kind of splitting our priorities. I'll also, just draw the attention to the staff report that did point to the fact that we've already initiated this, and to stop, full stop, to take a year off. Is it putting people that are playing by the rules at a disadvantage then? And I question that. And I don't really want to be supporting a system that kind of benefits people that go against the rules. So, I mean, to me, that makes sense to kind of move this forward for that reason. So I'm firm in my position that I do want to see this proceed, and the sooner the better, I see.
Thank you. Councillor Grant, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you to the rest of the council. I would agree with Councillor Cadeau. I was just going to bring up that I think this is a matter of fairness. If we were to pause for a year, those that have been already been reviewed under this process, it feels maybe that they are being unfairly penalized. And in regards to Councillor Bryant's question or point about being on either side of the farms that are already compliant, I would just point that, is it fair for farms that are doing everything right to allow other farmers who aren't doing everything they should be doing to kind of get away without any scrutiny? So I appreciate that it is kind of difficult on both sides, but I really come down on the matter of fairness for those who've already been reviewed and for those that are in good compliance, and letting other actors who aren't go scot-free, essentially.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to perhaps Deanne. Deanne, could you also comment on the notion that what staff looked at was also reasonableness and fairness when looking at businesses that may not have been operating appropriately versus businesses that already exist in some of our industrial park areas, and the conflicts that have existed, I guess, in the sense of, businesses existing on a farm property doing the same business versus industrial property, or sorry, businesses operating in an industrial area, and the unfairness with respect to who's paying what in terms of taxes. Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So that was part of the reason why we did start to undertake this process, is there is an unfair advantage to people that are operating on agricultural properties and paying agricultural taxes versus those people that are operating in an industrial area where the land is a lot more expensive to purchase, and also the tax base is, or the taxes are more expensive on that property. So that wasn't one of the factors that we were looking at. And then just also to answer the other question, I do have a response now for the numbers from our manager of planning, Jeremy Bink, and he said that it's about less than 10%. So out of 1,500 properties, we could expect about 100 of them to have those on-farm uses that did not comply with the current bylaw. Yeah, he didn't really have an estimate for the rest of the township, but I guess we could expect probably similar.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Deanne. How many more properties do we have that haven't been assessed yet for this purpose?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we've done 1/3 of the township for about 1,500 properties. So I guess we'll assume approximately 3,000 if we take 2 more thirds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question then. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Get Councillor Burgess back in. And we'll move on to staff reports and memos, and I will turn the floor over to Director of Corporate Services, Clerk Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. So this report, the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Resolution follow-up, really just to give council some background, this all originated from a Canadian Mental Health Association request that council consider a rainbow crosswalk in the township. After several discussions, councillor directed that staff consider connecting with the community to make Woolwich more equitable and inclusive, consider specific initiatives like a rainbow crosswalk, community events, or an equity, diversity and inclusion committee, and that council receive mandatory training on equity, diversity and inclusion. This report in front of you today follows up on the direction provided by the previous council, and staff are really recommending 2 main points here. The first is the creation of an ad hoc working group specific for the queer community that would look at making Woolwich a more inclusive place, including specific inclusion initiatives. And then the second item is to reaffirm the previous council's commitment that equity, diversity and inclusion training will be mandatory for council. And I've outlined in the report how staff plan to provide that training. Should council approve the recommendation tonight, I want to acknowledge that this is really only the start of our journey towards equity, diversity and inclusion. And it will complement the other work that we are already doing with the Reconciliation Action Partnership Working Group and the Countering Islamophobia Working Group. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from council.
Okay. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Director Smith. Support this wholeheartedly. I'm questioning if it makes sense to, and I understand kind of the history around this, but if we're going to be going forward with an ad hoc working group, can we broaden it out to be more more inclusive? I mean, if it is around inclusivity, you know, why just one group?
Through you, Mayor Shantz. So the recommendation in this report is really my best way to respond to Council's previous direction from last August following the discussion of the Rainbow Crosswalk. I think a focused short-term committee will be able to provide the advice that Council was looking for based on inclusive symbols or supports if we want to have those in place before the Woolwich Pride event, which is scheduled for June this year. And I think that the ad hoc working group can also provide some advice to Council on how effective a longer term diversity, equity, and inclusion committee would be. From the discussions that I've had with other staff in the region that have had equity, diversity, and inclusion committees, we've heard that sometimes those committees aren't as effective as you might expect them to be, just because the members from one minority community don't necessarily want to deal with issues from another. And also people that sit on those committees sometimes feeling tokenized, that they've been asked to do, you know, all the heavy lifting for their minority group. Going forward, what we'd really like to see is activities that happen organically from the community, like what we've seen recently with Woolwich Pride, the anti-racism speaker series group organized by Abby Cooper, recent Bring on the Sunshine Now Cafe, or the Anti-Islamophobia Working Group, all groups that came forward and made requests from the township. And what I think we need to do is we need to make sure that the community understands we're open for initiatives like that to come forward to Council. And then also that we would continue working with experts at other local municipalities, learn from their experiences for those that are a little farther ahead than us, and build on their expertise.
Thank you very much for that. Just as a follow-up, this is more for the benefit of Council, I suppose. But, you know, I've been in conversation with Director Smith over, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but the Council on Inclusive Municipalities, I believe is what it's called. And this was quite a while ago. So if it's not kind of jogging your memory, don't worry, I can send it back to you and to the rest of Council. But in essence, what it's saying is, you know, if we join this coalition, it doesn't really mean anything other than we're recognizing that inclusivity is important. And we're recognizing that it's going to take some time, energy, and effort, and maybe a little bit of money. And if we're willing to make a commitment to inclusivity in our communities, maybe it'd be something that Council would be interested in, you know, exploring further. So I'll open it up if anybody has heard of this, if anybody would be interested in potentially looking into this further. And I'm not suggesting that we have to kind of go through the budget deliberation and add a line this year. My goodness, no. But I'm also mindful that letters like the one that the previous Council received about a crosswalk is probably not just going to be an isolated incident. We're probably going to hear from a multitude of stakeholders that have their own interests. And I definitely appreciate what you're saying about, you know, not wanting to get into the tokenism there. But how can we be more deliberate with how we're supporting various groups within our community? It doesn't make sense to just look at things on a case-by-case basis and make a collective decision, or do we want to say, you know what, $5,000 is a reasonable budget for an annual inclusivity budget line, and from that budget, whatever comes before this Council, as long as it's within that budget, you know, we could generally approve it. But it's depoliticizing some of these things that are coming at us on a constant basis. And it's recognizing that Elmira is an inclusive community, but we're inclusive to all communities, you know, not we're just selecting based on who comes before us and asks for money. So it's something that I feel very strongly about, obviously, and it would be something that I would recommend Council at least look into, and I can provide you some context around that, and maybe for a discussion in another day.
I wonder if that's something we could ask staff to bring back some information in conjunction with Councillor Cadeau. to another meeting. That'd be great. Anyone else? Councillor Burgess?
Thanks, Mayor Shantz, through you. Just kind of want to follow up there on what Councillor Cadeau was saying and just say, like Elmira and Woolwich, we have a wide range of diversity in sexual orientation, gender expression, but also in ethnicity and age and disabilities, race, faith, and our unique Mennonite culture. And I just want to make sure we're going about this the right way so that everyone's voice is heard equally and we're not elevating one group so the others feel kind of othered in their uniqueness. So I just want to know, make sure we're putting the right plans in place for a long-term commitment so everyone is feeling inclusive and their voice is heard.
Okay, thank you. And would that be part of what you would bring back to us in conjunction with what Councillor Cadeau just talked about?
Yes, Mayor Shantz, we'd be happy to do that.
Councillor Schwint and then Councillor Cadeau.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Councillor Cadeau and Burgess were opening or widening the pie even more. I'm going to narrow it and looking at the staff recommendations, which I support all three of. I am wondering though on number 2 with the ad hoc working group, would it make sense for the chair, I even think co-chairs, should be a councillor or senior staff, in that they're not supposed to be the subject matter experts on the committee, but they're to ensure the conversation is answering questions that we as a township are looking to be answered and not go off on a tangent. And I think as a chair, that's the responsibility they hold. So I'm wondering if that's better served by us appointing the chair instead of the group appointing the chair.
Did you want to speak to that comment, Councillor Cadeau?
I do, because I think that might stifle some of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, Jeff, you used it, the organic nature of some of these. So while I recognize what you're saying, and it's not that I disagree, I think that the counterpoint would be that we really want to try to have this citizen-led initiatives. I'm just offering my point of view. I don't even know why. Maybe I'll leave it to you, Jeff.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. My perspective is actually very similar to Councillor Cadeau's. I think based on the membership of the committee, the terms of reference say that the committee will choose their own chair. If a member of council wants to sit on the committee, or one or more members of council want to sit on the committee, I have left a place for council to appoint those people tonight. I think what would be important in my mind is that if the committee was led by someone with lived experience in the area, so as much as if you know, an ally of the queer community wants to sit on the committee, I think it might be more impactful to have someone with lived experience as the chair, whether that be a member of council or a member of the community.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. I will move this forward. I have no concerns with it the way that it's written. I kind of see the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities as separate and aside, even though it's related. I really don't have any concerns moving this forward as it sits now. Potentially, you know, widening and adding that piece of the pie in, that maybe we consider looking at that. But I think that there's space and time for that. I don't think that we need to, you know, rush out of the gate by any means. However, you know, if that direction is there and staff's going to take that back and work on a report, I don't want to hinder this process. I would definitely urge that we action this. So I'll move it.
Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, Mayor Shantz. Through you, just to follow up a bit more. Like right now, we're looking to create this ad hoc committee for the 2S LGBTQIA+ group. Would we have the resources and time if other marginalized communities or other groups wanted to come forward for similar things? Just looking long term again to make sure we're equitable across the board. Can we respond to that? Can we be fair?
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. So I think that the question, or the comment I would make is we're definitely open to other marginalized groups coming forward, and we would work as staff to support them. I think the question would be or reorganizing resources to deal with a request, because we are short-staffed. You know, I offered to lead the 2S LGBTQ 2S ad hoc working group. But we'd have to find some time as other groups came forward with different requests. But I should say, you know, as requests are coming forward, we recently had another one for a Black History Month event, which is coming up next week, and we're trying to support that too. So there are things coming forward, and we are working to support them.
Mr. Brownman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to council, just to follow up on Councillor Burgess's question, and actually use a comment from Councillor Cadeau. I think one of the other things we've recognized is, because we are, resource challenged. Mr. Smith and I have started to have regular contact with the EDI managers, the full-time managers that exist at the city, region, and police level. Certainly we're not about to ask for staff resources in that area when this is a particular area that we can certainly rely on best practices and expertise and advice that exists. However, so that's one way to deal with the resource challenge in terms of best practices and information. But I believe Councillor Cadeau, has some merit in terms of the fact, and I'll just use, Abby Cooper's series that she's hosting at the hub at the rec center, is those types of initiatives. It would be good in the future if we had a plan in place and a budget in place to be able to support organic, evolving messages and initiatives and events. Because certainly us having meetings with other EDI managers across the region, this should be an evolving journey. This should not be a plan where you have tick boxes and go, okay, we're done. That's not how things will evolve. But I think this journey that we've been on, I think has been a great reflection on the fact that while certainly it's very extremely unfortunate, the events of last August, the reality is when we reflected on what Woolwich is a part of in this region, the mayor has had meetings and staff have worked with the Bring On the Sunshine group. There have been initiatives and events. It's not like those things have not happened. We are an active member of the Indigenous Reconciliation Action Partnership, again, trying to move things forward on truth and reconciliation. Tonight, you appointed members to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee. So when you talk about accessibility issues and universal design issues, we are at the table, again, collaborating and partnering where appropriate, either with our municipal colleagues or also outside organizations. But the likes of Bring On the Sunshine and other groups, or even like Abby Cooper and her initiatives, those are the things I think that would be great to look at for the future, and having an appropriate fund or line item in the budget for the future would be something that certainly staff could see, asking for.
Okay. Councillor Cadeau moved the recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bryant. Councillor Schwint.
I'm still going to go back to the process thing. Maybe my memory is too fresh from Thursday night sitting on the tag meeting. And I look at this terms of reference and I understand the intent. I support the intent and the goal. I'm not seeing timelines and feedback that I was hoping to see. I guess my expectation would be a committee of council like this would at least report back at least annually. That's saying 2 to 4 meetings, I think I saw, but goes until the end of the term of council. That's 4 years. To me, that doesn't reconcile. I'd like to see something at least annually from this committee saying, here's some ideas. That maybe 4 reports over 4 years, great. But let's have some deliverables to make sure we're doing what we want to do, as opposed to having a committee and saying, oh, we've done our job. No, let's do something actionable.
I would note that we're calling this a working group, so I wonder if you want to speak to differences between a committee of council and a working group.
Yes, Mayor Shantz, through you and to Councillor Schwint. An ad hoc working group is essentially meant to have a defined purpose and then finish its work at the defined purpose. But under your procedural bylaw, it automatically ends at the end of the term of council. So where a lot of our committees will continue on, they'll keep working until new members are appointed. An ad hoc working group is basically done at the end of the term of council or when they finish their work. And in this case, I definitely anticipate them giving an early report, at least to council, hopefully well before June, in sort of in line with the Pride celebration being planned. And then, maybe there's some additional work that they do afterwards, but I don't see the term of this committee going for the entire 4 years.
We could add a date to the recommendation if council's wishing that. Councillor Schwinn.
I just want to understand how the regular feedback will happen. I hate to have them do work in isolation that we don't implement.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you to Councillor Schwint. I think if we were to have councillors sitting on that council or a working group, that would maybe alleviate some of that, because that councillor could then report back at regular council meetings in regards to what's going on within that group.
Okay. It's been moved. Councillor Burgess, go ahead.
Just want to make one more comment. Sorry, just kind of along the similar veins we were talking about earlier. I understand what CAO Bredeman was saying, but we don't want to check boxes, and we're kind of working with the region on other initiatives. I just still think it would be good for the township before we move ahead to kind of have a bit of more of a plan in place to reach out to other groups specifically, just so they have the same access to council as this group does, just so we're equitable across the board. And that's just kind of where I stand right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, again, the report that we were asking for each bring back, can we get a rough time estimate on when that might be expected? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
That's a great question.
You can do it by quarter if you'd like.
How about Q2?
Is that okay? Council? Yeah. And then that would include the items that people have, including what Councillor Burgess just asked about in terms of how we actively encourage groups to come forward and make them feel like they're safe and welcome to do so.
Yes, Mayor Shantz, we can do all those things that the council's asked. I've been making some notes.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to call a question. Oh, no, I'm not. Clerk Smith.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz. I just wanted to point out that in the recommendation before you, there was a blank for the appointment of any a councillor or councillors to sit as council representatives if council so desires, and if any member of council wishes to sit on the ad hoc working group.
I think I got a sense that council would like to have someone on there. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Clerk Smith, I would be happy to sit on that committee.
Thank you. Is there someone else who is really wanting to sit on that committee? Okay.
I would be happy to sit on it as well.
Okay.
If you're looking for more representation from council, happy to.
I think just if council wishes. So if
I'm not going to fight Gayla over it though.
I don't think we have to arm wrestle.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the space.
We can make room for both of you.
Awesome.
Yes. Okay. All those in favor? And that's carried. Opposed? No. Yes. For more info?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That is carried. Okay, other business. Well, we spent a lot of time discussing budget and we sort of glossed over a few items. And Mr. Petherick has itemized those items for us so that we can do some clarification tonight before bringing the budget forward on February 14th. And I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Petherick, and you can help us through those.
Thanks. Excellent. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with council's indulgence, I'd like to kind of step through each one individually. So actually, let's go through one, have the discussion, set the direction, then we'll kind of move on from there. And obviously at the end is council's opportunity to sort of chime in and, comment on or make suggestions of anything else, or even question what they would want to see in the budget. So a couple of the first two I want to do is just sort of circle back to some of the direction that council already gave in some of our previous budget deliberations. One is just to reconfirm that council directed staff to take out the $100,000 that we had in the capital budget under equipment for the two building vehicles. And just a reminder, council, I was coming from the Building Administration Reserve Fund, so that wasn't a levy thing, but council directed to take that out. Am I still correct in that? I mean, nods or thumbs up, or if I was correct? Yep. Okay. See a majority of that, so that's good. Second one, still in the capital budget under the property maintenance, it was the removal of the EV charging stations. Now, I guess this is where the interpretation, because I took it that it was removing the whole entire project, and that was for both the admin building and the St. Jacobs, I guess, public parking lot. But I think there are others who think that it was just the admin building. And so I kind of bring that a little bit up because staff have been able to also see that there's a grant that we can apply for EV charging stations. It won't cover, I think it is just less than half that it would cover. So if council may be interested in having staff at least explore or putting an application in and see where it goes, and if we are successful, we can bring something back to council at that time. So from that, I guess the discussion from council, the direction I'd be looking for is, one, would we be taking out that whole entire project, or would we be leaving some in for like the St. Jacobs public parking, or how would you like us to kind of proceed with that?
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Richard. My understanding is we were pulling the whole charging station component out, but maybe somebody else had a different take on it.
Councillor Schwint.
Through you to staff, would the St. Jacobs charging station, I guess, pay for itself over, next question, how many years? I'm assuming the hydro we'd sell, we'd mark it up to pay for the infrastructure. What's the anticipated payback?
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I was going to hope that Thomas was going to hop onto that one.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Schwinn. I'm not certain that I have an answer for you. It's all dependent on, the use, but we would have we would be recouping the cost for use of the charging stations, and based on the grant that staff are able to apply for, it would enable $10,000 per charging port. So that station, if my memory is correct, those stations, were budgeted at $65,000, and we would be hopeful to get upwards of 40 for the grant funding for that project.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. You said 10,000 per port?
Per charging port, yes, correct.
And the 65,000 was for the whole project?
For the St. Jacobs station, I believe. Give me a
so it would be 4 ports then?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Councillor Schwint.
Based on that information, I'd be inclined to support the St. Jacobs one, because I see it as a broader public service and we'll get our money back over time, versus here at the admin building for our own vehicles. That didn't make sense to me. So that's where my head's at.
Councillor Grant and then Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. For you to the rest of council, I would agree with Councillor Schwint. When I left that meeting, the implication that I thought was we would remove from the admin building but we found value in charging stations in more public locations that tourists or residents could use.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you, to Director Vanderhoff, I suppose. If we were to go ahead with this, would there be any cost to us to administer collecting of fees or anything to, of that nature?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Cadeau. So there is a membership fee. It would depend on the service provider that we go through. The two larger ones are ChargePoint and Flow. And we got pricing today for another company called Switch, but it was roughly $200 a year to administer the oversight and the software and that sort of thing.
I'm just struggling with this one. Like, does council want to get into the business of, EV charging? Or do we want to leave it to private industry to manage in our township? I think that's what this question really boils down to. Perhaps, do we have any EV stations going in at the new gas station that's being developed on the south end? I don't know who I'm asking this to. If anybody knows the answer, I suppose.
Is that a question for Mr. Poupet or Ms. Freeze? Still there, Jared and Deanne?
I think that's a development question, Mayor Shantz.
Okay. Deanne, are you there? Do you know the answer?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? My sound is cutting out.
Yep.
I heard my name though.
We're wondering about the charging stations and whether there's any being put into the new gas stations that are being developed at the south end of Elmira.
Sorry, I'm still not catching everything you're saying. Can you hear me?
Yes. So
do you mind repeating that?
Yeah, the new gas stations that are going in at the south end of Elmira, will there be EV stations as part of those developments? Do you know?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry. No, sorry, I don't know if there's going to be EV charging stations there. I can talk to the manager of planning and get back to council on that, but I don't know at this point.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be good to know, but I guess I'll submit that St. Jacobs and Elmira are two distinct areas for these purposes. So people are in St. Jacobs, we want to have facilities for them to be able to charge electrical vehicles. Long term, no. I agree, Councillor Cadeau, we're not in that business. Short term, it's sort of like solar panels. We try and encourage it and get that infrastructure started with the hope that it takes off. So I guess I'd still be in favor of the St. Jacobs project at this point.
So if we went ahead with that project, the net, and we get the funding, the net cost to us would be 25,000, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And we will report back to council prior to awarding the project as well too, and inform council on whether we're successful with the grant application as we go.
Okay, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Just a comment. I would agree with Councillor Cadeau. I don't want to see us in the business of setting up charging stations and running into all those issues. I think that's something that needs to be left for the private sector.
Okay, we're not getting consensus here.
I mean,
So-
sorry, I can chime in.
Cadeau.
Because there is the potential for the grant application. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Schwent. Maybe we do as a council kind of need to take a step up and say, this is the future and this is, what we're gonna need to start looking at if we're gonna make a dent in, our promises for climate goals. So with that being said, I mean, I see the value of it, especially around the grants. So if we were successful with the grants, I would definitely be okay with this. I'm not against it, just kind of initially.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Shantz. Just for clarity, I'm not sure if I missed this. We keep talking about grant costs and the original upfront cost, but did you say what the ongoing fee to the township is? Like you talked about the $200. But like, are we making money off it, or who's supplying the electricity, that sort of thing?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. So the township would be supplying the electricity, whether it is a revenue generating endeavor. I'm not certain, and I can't speak to. I mean, we would. I suppose what I could possibly do for council is reach out to some of our counterparts in Wilmot and some of the other areas that do have charging stations that are publicly owned to see if they're revenue generating for them or not, or an expense.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on that, yeah, it'd be nice to know they're at least a break even, if not a revenue generating, as opposed to a net loss each year. I don't think I'd want to move ahead with that.
You said, go ahead, Richard.
I was like, can I go ahead? Thank you, David. So I think just as Mr. Vanderhoff, indicated, we're going to put in a grant application, and we still will come back to council with regards to whether we're successful or not. So maybe a suggestion I would have is that we put the project, into the capital budget, account for the grant. The remaining portion will still come from the climate action greening levy, or reserve fund, I should say. And then when we report back on that grant, we can actually hopefully answer some of council's questions with regards to, the revenue generation or not.
Is council agreed on that direction? I see some nodding, some thumbs up, some kind of thumbs up, kind of, sort of. We'll wait to hear back on it. Is that where we're going? Yeah, okay. That's a sort of consensus, Richard.
No problem. Thank you, Madam. I mean, this will all come back as part of the final budget too. So if council wants, we can have another discussion about it.
All right.
The next is with the corporate services grant. So that is the grants budget within Mr. Smith's area. If council recall through his presentation, there are 2 grants for $3,000 each that would be proposed to come out. One would be for them, our homecoming, as the other one is for the for Food for Kids Waterloo region. And so I guess the direction from council is, do we just remove that or reallocate it? How would council like to kind of deal with it at the initial stage?
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I guess my comment would be, instead of just spending it on something, why don't we put it in reserves? If we haven't got a specific need for it now, we shouldn't be looking for ways to spend it. We should be putting it aside for future use. Just my thought.
Councillor Cadeau. And
thank you, Mayor. Through you, I have a wonderful idea that we could put it towards. Perhaps we put it towards some inclusive, that budget line that we had suggested, some inclusivity initiatives. I had suggested maybe we don't do it in this budget just because it's been so tight. But if there is, I mean, $6,000 is quite a bit of money, and there's a lot of good that the community could really do with that money. So I would put forth the recommendation that we take the $6,000 and put it towards diversity, equity, inclusion type initiatives for the community.
Councillor Burgess and then Grant.
I was just gonna, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz. We have a few other items coming forward. I think we're going to discuss about on other grants we didn't touch on originally. So I'm assuming we can just put the 6,000 towards some of those funds, if that's reasonable.
Should we hold that until the end of our discussion? Councillor Grant?
I was just gonna, through you, Mayor Shantz, to this council, I was just gonna support with Councillor Burgess's point that I would, if we have the extra funds, we could use it towards an inclusivity kind of measures.
Okay, Mr. Petherick, I wonder if we can get through all the grants and then you can sort of summarize where we landed. And then we'll see what's left.
Absolutely. Yeah, for now, I heard hold.
Okay.
The other one was a suggestion, again, under Mr. Smith's presentation when he did corporate services way back now a couple of weeks ago, about potential savings of $1,500 in the in his overhead budget under minor capital. But he also made a suggestion that he was looking to see, so wanted to have secondary monitors in the council chambers, and that was going to be at a cost of about $2,800. So there were savings he saw about $1,500 by not purchasing a laptop. And the other one is just spending additional funds on monitors for the council chambers.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the council. When it comes to second monitors, I really feel that it is a nice to have, not necessarily a need to have.
Councillor Cadeau.
It is really nice to have. I purchased my own. Wasn't overly expensive. If anybody needs a good line on a good monitor, let me know and I can hook you up. I agree. It's a nice have. It's not a need. Could the money be better spent elsewhere? Yeah, I think so. So I think for now, as it was a really nice gesture and token. And I apologize being the counselor that put up a stink. But I appreciate the machine that we have, and I think that we could probably make do.
Councillor Grant.
I'll just say this through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau. I am currently using a second monitor, so like I fully enjoy the privilege of it, but I agree. I think it could be better spent.
Mr. Smith.
Council, I'll just add through you, Mayor Shantz, that if members of council are feeling the need that they need to go out and buy their own, I really do think it's the township's prerogative to give you the tools you need to do your jobs. The other piece to this was secondary monitors for both council and staff. So if staff do end up spending more time in council chambers, I think there's a real benefit to giving staff, a secondary monitor. We've heard some senior staff that are at home, they have multiple monitors at home, or even when they were zooming in from their desk where they have multiple monitors. It can be a benefit to council. I was going to say if it was something that the cost was a factor, we could look into some alternatives or even buying maybe a few less, just to see if we can save a little bit of money, maybe come in closer to that $1,500. But my main point is that these are tools, and we should be giving council and staff the tools that they need to do their jobs in chambers.
Okay. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Director Smith. I appreciate that. That's some good feedback. And I think, hearing it from that perspective, I could almost get behind it because I do want to equip staff. I think that that's key. And, because we are moving to more of a hybrid work model where you can choose, to be here in person or at home. People may not wish to come in as often because perhaps their home setup has that second monitor. So I could see the value. I understand the value because I can't go without my second monitor. Don't get me wrong. So I mean, I'm willing to be flexible on this if council so chooses to. There's no better way to flip flop than that, is there? In the same meeting, saying I'm for it and against it.
Well done. Anyone else want to speak to this? Okay, can I get a thumbs? So we've got second monitors for council and for staff, and it's all combined in one parcel. I'll let Mr. Smith go and then
Sure. I was going to say through you, Mayor Shantz, just that, you know, if it was a cost issue because we were actually asking for additional money that was in that minor capital budget line, we could see if we could keep the line the same and get the devices within that budget. Whether it's finding a sale or maybe we don't maybe purchase quite as many as we were originally looking to, and maybe we're doing some swapping or something like that. If it was that the ask was in addition to the money that was already there. But I guess my question would be, you know, is council concerned about the additional cost or about the idea in and of itself?
I can say I really like having 2 monitors. I mean, I'm working with one in paper and a screen up there. And, you know, at the region, we've got a monitor that we share between 2 people because the seating allows for it. It's a bigger sort of monitor. And then with our report on our laptop, it really is helpful, especially with the hybrid meetings. Councillor Schwind.
So question of clarification, buying these monitors, buy a dozen or 15 monitors and they'd sit at these desks. We just come in, have access to them. It's not that we have our individual monitor we take home. So as I'm saying, it's more than just council that be using the monitors.
Yes.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, yeah, that's true. This room does get used for other meetings, and that could be helpful for the other, you know, boards, committees, or even staff meetings that are hosted here.
So to be transparent, if council doesn't buy one, I'm going to buy one for myself. I can go either way on this one too.
Okay, I would suggest as Clerk Smith said that, you know, it's important that councillors have the tools to do their job properly. And, you know, I like the 2 monitors. I'm hearing councillors say that they're going to buy their own. I think if we need it for our jobs, then we should get them. Councillor Bryant.
I do agree. I find if you split the screen, particularly on a screen of this side, you can't read what's on the one side, and it's very, very difficult. So when I do the Zoom meetings from home, I have this set up with one. I've got my own computer with something else. It's too difficult to work on a small screen and split it.
Yeah. Okay, so are we back to going ahead with them?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, again, I think that it sounds like council was supportive of the monitors. Was maybe the question, you know, asking for additional money in that budget line, or was it just, you know, if we live within that line that's already been proposed and there's no impact, would that be acceptable?
Councillor Grant and then Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the rest of council, I would support this if we were kept within the 1,500 that was originally proposed. I wouldn't want to see us spend over that budget for additional monitors.
Councillor Cadeau.
Yeah, it was along the same lines as that. I think that's something, depending on how many you get, you could probably make that work. I suppose, to be devil's advocate, because why not? You get what you pay for. So I guess I'm concerned that if we go ahead with 20 monitors for $1,500, they're not going to last, right? So I don't know. Monitors, who thought?
Okay, so I've heard Councillor Burgess, did you want to chime in? I've heard still 2 different opinions here, and it takes a while if we're going to consensus. Can I have a thumbs up if you are in agreement to go with monitors within the $1,500 budget? Yes. Okay. There's your direction.
Perfect. Thank you. Hopefully we'll not take as long for each item. The next one is with regards to, you remember we had a couple of delegations on the second budget night. First one I want to touch on is former Councillor Bauman's request for tree maintenance. And I think it might be better that Jared, so I'm going to put Mr. Poupe and Mr. Vanderhoff on the spot, because they could probably talk to a lot better and more eloquently than I can on his request and some of the thoughts they have on it.
I don't know who will go first, but maybe through you, Mayor Shantz, to council. I think when Mr. Vanderhoff and I met with former Councillor Bauman, we had discussed some interim measures. So Mr. Bauman does yeoman's work for us as far as pruning and looking after the trees, and that obviously is a passion of his. And that's a wonderful thing in Woolwich, where we have a lot of community members come alongside. And it's something that I think we struggle with at times, to how do we support that. Ultimately, I think Woolwich will need, and I think this is down the road, but a forestry division of some form. That's what you really need to look after trees. So how do we get from where we are today to that end goal? And I think it's a staged approach, quite frankly. I think that with former Councillor Bauman committing to sort of working over the next couple of years, I think what we would intend to do then is to look at our plans of subdivision first and foremost, and look to revise potentially our plans of subdivision or our subdividers agreement to look at pruning as an important piece. We could then also look at contracted services to help support this, because we don't have the staff resourcing to do that. That's quite frankly how it is. So we could look at contracted services to help support. So it is a bit of a staged approach that staff would see at this point. We just couldn't put all the resourcing that's required to do the pruning. Now, the wonderful news is, here's the good news piece, is that Mr. Bauman has basically gone around the township, and since we've got a couple of years left, I think he set us up very well. And I think that's the momentum we do not want to lose. So I think it'll be this council's decision over the next few years through budget on how we truly tend to this issue. Is it through staffing? Is it continued contracted services? But that's what we're proposing right now. And how we were able to manage this is we would throw some services out to support Mr. Bauman through our chipper to pick up bins, and that was sort of shared duties between both Mr. Vanderhoff's department and our department. So what we would be looking to do is to continue that, I think, in the short term, and then to sort of hone that into one department at a future date, and then and deal with this as future budgets come. But I think that we will be able to manage the next couple of years and set ourselves up for what we envision to be the future plan for Woolwich. And I think that we could either prepare a report to council for their consideration over the course of this year. But in the interim, I think it's important that we catch the pruning at the right time, which would be new developments, for example, and where Mr. Bauman has already pruned trees. I think we just don't want to lose that momentum. I think that's the key piece.
Mr. Vanderhoff, did you have anything to add? Ms. Freese, go ahead. Sorry, Deanne got her hand up quicker.
That's fine.
I just wanted to build on what Jared had said. We are doing a review of the subdivision agreement right now internally. So we did add in a new clause in there that would require some pruning during the maintenance period for the new subdivisions. So that's something that we'll consider for this round of the subdivision agreement update.
Mr. Vanderhoff.
I don't have much further to add, other than we'll continue to work with Mr. Bauman and discuss with him how we can best support him over the next year or two, whether it's some staffing help or some contracted services, that sort of thing. But we'll try and bridge that gap, as Mr. Poupé has mentioned, before we come back to council with some future direction and how we want to move forward over the next 2 to 5 years.
Council. Good. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. More a comment to Director Poupé's point. Momentum is huge, and I would hate to see momentum on this be lost. I think that the question really arises is whether or not this is sustainable, but based on what I'm hearing from staff, I don't think that this is intended to be a sustainable initiative, right? This is supposed to be something to get us through the next few years. And start to, give us some time to plan how to really tackle this more fulsomely. So I think that it is a good initiative. It's a large ask, though. It's a rather large ask when we're already trying to find areas to cut from the budget. So I'm struggling because if we're looking for things to get rid of and we're struggling with that already, it makes it really easy to, to identify things that we haven't looked at like this and want to remove it. I caution against something like that. Reflecting on that delegation and my own personal experience watching trees decimated by pruning practices that could have been alleviated if it was done more intentionally when the tree was a little bit younger. Losing arms the size of your leg is not ideal, and I would hate to see the trees suffer through that in this township. So I'm leaning towards supporting this. I'm wondering if we could maybe look at the overall cost and maybe bring it down a little bit. I'm open to suggestions from other council.
Mr. Brenneman.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to council, I guess I just want to be clear and from our discussions at senior management, what I want to be clear on, what we're trying to get your direction on is we realize how tight this year is. I think what staff, Jared, Deanne, and Thomas have tried to outline is that we would find ways to support former Councillor Bauman and the work this year, not through asking for any additional asks for funding, but we would bring a report forward as part of the 2024 budget to be able to speak to the future years. That's what we've talked about during senior management is, would council be supportive of a direction that you heard the ask? We appreciate how tight it is. We're not asking for additional funds. We're asking for support that staff will find ways to support the efforts this year, again, as a stopgap measure, but bring a more fulsome report that you can entertain as part of the 2024 budget process to be clear on what we're looking for consensus on.
Okay. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing thumbs up and heads nodding. That's a good thing.
So, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the other delegation that night that Council heard was from Inga Rennie with regards to additional funding for the rural side planting. I think right now what we have, so her ask, I heard was $50,000 per year, but I think it may be 52. And that was going to be for each of the years over the next 3 years. So that's 23, 24, and 25. So that was her ask. But I mean, right now, council can decide, at least for 2023, if that's what the comfort level is. And currently we have in the 2023 RCS Parks operating budget, it's under the greening climate GL line. We have 25,000 in there right now. We also have 10,000 in for the Amira Nature Reserve, which we hear that can actually be shifted towards this project. So that would give 35,000 out of that 50 or 52,000. So they'd be looking for another 15 to 17,000. I would also want to say that the money that we currently have allocated toward this project, as well as that additional 10, that's still all coming from the Climate Action Greening Infrastructure Reserve Fund. So that's where that funding is coming from to that operating budget. And so I guess the question to council is are you comfortable with the 35,000, or would you like to see the request up to that 52,000 be recognized?
Councillor Schwint.
Refresh my memory, please. Is there other cost sharing on this project that they're obtaining elsewhere, or is there opportunities for the township to get some cost sharing from somewhere else? I can't believe a project like this wouldn't have some sort of grant opportunities somewhere.
Mr. Patrick.
I would say that I'm not entirely sure if staff has looked into grant projects for that. I'm not even as familiar with the inner workings of it. I think maybe Mr. Branderhoff may be better able to answer that. But I know that, I think what, Mr. Rene said was that it is pretty cost effective because they have volunteers doing a lot of this work. And so I don't know if there's other grants that staff, Thomas, I don't know if you've looked into that or not.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwent. So this is a Trees for Woolwich initiative, so I don't have all the details, but I am able to follow up with our environmental coordinator to get a sense of how much funding on the project is coming from donations, because I know that that's a component as well. And the time will be donated from Earthscapes as well, working on this project. But yeah. So I can follow up with council on that.
So matching would be more like gifts in kind, it sounds like, volunteer effort and gifts in kind. Councillor Bryant and then Councillor Cadeau.
I support the planting of the trees. I think we need to green the township, but I'm having difficulty with the dollar amount. I would be happy if we gave them the 35 or whatever that money was that was just mentioned by Richard. I think he said 35, 36, something around that. I think we have to trim it back from that 52 ask. I just don't want to see us adding more and more and increasing the budget.
Just understanding this isn't coming from the levy, right? Councillor Burgess, Councillor Cadeau, and did you have your hand up too? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Poupet. I'm wondering if there would be any concerns from your end in the tree planting along our roadsides. I just wanted to make sure that this was being done and not to the expense of staff having to maintain these roads.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to council. I think it's a difficult piece, because again, we have this wonderful community group that's putting all this time and energy into a really great work. And again, it's sort of a challenge from our perspective, from a resourcing side of things. So I think what would sort of form part of this future report would be a bit encompassing regarding the road corridor as well, because I think what we have to appreciate is that when we do plant a tree, it is an asset. It is something that we want to look after and maintain from cradle to grave. And I think that's when you get your benefit. So what we've been able to do is come alongside this group and sort of identify roadways that have at least 20 meters in width. We are going to help this initiative by identifying the property line so that they can plant just inside that property boundary, and be able to support this group in that manner as well, so that we can give some direction, because they've got such great hearts. They just want to go plant the town, and that does cause some complications, certainly with some of our renewal programs and so forth, and appreciating the last thing we want to do is plant a tree and then have to remove it a few years later. So I think we've spent some time looking at that and identifying areas that we certainly can support and get behind and help manage that this year. But from a long-term strategy, we're going to run out of roads. Woolwich has a lot of narrow road corridors. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of 20-meter wide road allowances. And I think the biggest bang for your buck isn't so much boulevard trees, it's more your large stature trees is where you get that more benefit from an environmental perspective. So I think there is more work. And again, it is one of those pieces that we just don't have that resource on a full-time basis. So I think we've been able to manage and share resourcing between RCS and IS, and that's what we're doing here. But I think we've got a good plan for this year. And I think that what we do need to do is put our heads together and provide council with a report of some form of direction that we can start to look at and explore together.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Director Vanderhoff, maybe. A little vague on the details, but I think there's a report out there that we're looking to hit a target of certain tree coverage, and just wondering the advantage of us initiating this to help us meet our goals there.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. The greening infrastructure report did have a tree canopy target that we, at this point in time, are not on track to meet. And I think that is a focus of Trees for Woolwich, certainly. I can also just add some further information for council as well too, because of the elimination of the administration building EV charging stations. That does free up reserve funding as well too, which could be directed to cover this additional request from Trees for Woolwich of 17,000 and would not have an impact on the levy. Sorry.
Mr. Brenneman.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to actually Richard. Richard, could you also confirm that a potential additional source is now under the new hydro merger under Innova? My understanding is that similar to what Kitchener-Wilmot received from the former Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, all of the area municipalities will be able to ask for similar funding in the amount of $50,000 per year from that fund. That's what I understand from recent information. I just wondered if that would not be a potential source of funding as well, because I think that's an ask that we can make on an annual basis.
To you, Madam Mayor. Yes, and my apologies to Councillor Swinton. I did forget about that one. Yes, David reminded me that there is a grant that we potentially could tap into, because it is relatively new for us. That wasn't new for Kitchener-Wilmot, but it is new for us. And I believe the stipulations that, at least that I understand, is those plantings should not be maples and they should not be near hydro wires. That is really the stipulation. I think once you can get the plan in place that I guess satisfies or doesn't satisfy those two, then I believe we can actually apply for funding for that. And essentially it's like you apply for it and you will receive it. That's my understanding of the grant.
Councillor Schwinn.
Sorry, you're gonna have to indulge me here. What's wrong with maple trees?
The Madam Mayor, I think it's just the probably the height that they grow. That's probably what I'm going to guess. That would be my best guess. It's just a stipulation they have. Not good for Omar. We like maple trees.
Remember, it came from Kitchener-Wilmot as well. Councillor Burgess. Sorry, Natasha and Barry.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Yeah, I would promote going ahead with 50,000, especially if we're getting the funding. And I don't know if we also have that 6,000 we talked about that I don't know if we'd want to put towards this. Yeah. And the last thing I'd say, I don't know if this is for staff or for Trees for Woolwich, but just working with the farmers that farm right beside some of these roadways and stuff. I know planting there can cause controversy. So just be wary of that.
Mr. Poupé, be forewarned.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, we've absolutely, as a big component of this, is actually engaging the adjacent property owners, obviously, and making sure that we are informing them of what the plan is and have that discussion. So we're certainly on top of that piece. Thank you.
Okay. So we've sort of talked all around this. Richard, do you have a screen you can share with us that shows sort of where we're at with things? Because I think we keep coming back to dollars that are, we talked about earlier in the evening, and
so through Madam Mayor, not a screen per se that would give council a good direction of where they're at from a dollar perspective, because I don't think there's been a decision made that would kind of reflect that. I think there just been, I think right now, as I said, we removed the 100,000 from the equipment for the building vehicles. We're going to only leave in 65,000 for the EV charging station. That budget, I think, was 108, and so we're going to leave in 65, but we're going to shift it around so that it shows a grant of 40,000 coming. But I think from this request, maybe if council is supportive of at least supporting the request of 52,000 from Inga's request, we can still kind of show it that the increase will come from, I would call it, donations. And at least that way, if we achieve the whole 50,000 from this grant from the Nova Hydro, then that means we'll just be able to take less from the Climate Action Greening Infrastructure Reserve Fund.
Councillor Schwint.
Question on the ANOVA program, would tree pruning be eligible for that as well, or is it strictly tree planting?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, my understanding is it is tree planting.
Yeah, I think so too.
So there's a source of funding for this.
So we have dollars for this. It's a matter of council supporting it.
I support it.
Yes, yes, yes. Thumbs up. Okay.
I would support it as well. Sorry, I'm just having some internet connections.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay, Richard, I think we have support for Inga's request then.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, I'll make those changes in the budget and have that reflected when the final budget comes forward to council.
Okay.
Next one was a delegation that John Clay made on behalf of the MRBIA, who's requesting 10,000 for the CIP. So that's the community improvement plan that they have for the facade improvement and accessibility. As well, it was also seeking 20,000 for the downtown Elmira greening project. So I don't know what council thinks about that, if there's something that they want to entertain this year or whether it's something they want to entertain in the future year. But I think it's just important that we make sure we circle back and have a direction from council on.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Plethorick. The CIP, is that something that we generally support, or is this a new funding request?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's a new funding request. The MRBIA requested it last year as well, and council made no decision on it, so it was not included in the 2022 budget. So they come forward and requested the 10,000 again. So the CIP technically, while it's ours, they undertook the study to have the mechanism in place to be able to do these types of works. But we just haven't, as a township, been a funding partner. They've been funding it on their own so far.
Mr. Brenner.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm wondering though if Director Freeze can comment on the last part of what Mr. Petherick had said about the involvement of municipalities in community improvement plans based on her experience.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So community improvement plans can be very useful to from a planning perspective, because it allows the municipality to give specific incentives within that community improvement area. So having the BIA undertake a community improvement plan can be very useful to us in any kind of incentive programs that we want to establish for the Elmira downtown. Right now, as Richard had mentioned, the funding is only for those signage and facade improvements that the BIA has initiated on their own, and there's no contribution from the township. That doesn't mean that we can't use the CIP in the future to establish other incentive programs as well.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a follow-up, yeah, I think that the CIP had a lot to do with the signage as well as accessibility, if I'm not mistaken. So I just wanted to make council aware that it's not just facades that the community improvement plan is after, but the accessibility of the businesses in Main Street as well. Not Main Street, sorry, Arthur Street.
Just for clarity, because I don't remember, was the request for anything from the CIP or specifically for facades?
Madam Mayor, I believe it was 6,000 for the facade and 4,000 for the accessibility, if I remember that correctly.
Thank you. So we've got 10,000 request for the CIP and a 20,000 request for greening. So let's deal with the CIP. Where does council stand? Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. I fully support the CIP. The $20,000 for the greening is where I kind of struggle. I see the value in offering some financial compensation for the work that the BIA does down there, just because our downtown core is lacking greenery. There's no question about that. And it's not just a thing of being visually unappealing. It creates a heat trap for residents, and that heat trap is a very real thing, especially in the summer with all that heavy truck traffic coming in and the emissions there. It creates health hazards for residents there. So I see the value in supporting the BIA and trying to bring some greenery in, at least in the short term, until we can have Arthur Street reconstructed and be more deliberate in how we're bringing in some green space. $20,000 is a big ask, though, and I recognize that. I would just ask council to really consider the health and safety aspect of it too, not just the beauty of it.
Ms. Freese, did you want to weigh in?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to remind council that we do have that downtown Elmira plan. So we are contributing to the Elmira core area. However, that those street trees that will eventually be along Arthur, we don't know the timing of when that work will actually be done. It has to be coordinated with the regional work that's also on Arthur Street. So our contribution to any greening on Arthur Street will be not until that actual construction.
Okay, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Just a comment. We have two BIAs that we deal with, one in St. Jacobs and one in Elmira. And I think we have to look at it from a fairness perspective. What we do for one, we basically have to do for the other. So I think we have to be very careful what we do in this case. Just my thoughts.
Councillor Cadeau.
I agree. I recognize what you're saying, but I think that we have to remember that one BIA came forth and delegated to us and one didn't. So, if the St. Jacobs BIA, for instance, had some requests that they needed, they would have had a seat to come and delegate to us if they so chose, right?
Councillor Schwinn.
Careful, we may have one more delegation next budget, I'm pretty sure. I see the value in the greenery and want to find the money for this, but I'm feeling more generous with respect to paying for greenery than I am paying for businesses facade or access. To me, one's a community improvement that we are all better for. One is a business advertising. So I'm wondering, do we shift funds that way to get greenery if that's what we feel is better for downtown Elmira?
Okay, Councillor Grant.
I would, through you, Mayor Johnson, to council, I would concur with Councillor Schwinn. I have a harder time with us supporting paying for businesses to put up signs, where I'd rather see that fund go towards more greening initiatives. We've just had lengthy conversations in regards to tree trimming and tree planting, so it feels a little disingenuous to then say no to greening measures within the downtown core of Elmira. But just when it comes down to the sign end of things, I'm a little less sympathetic, I guess.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Plethoric. Can you just remind us, was there a cost sharing mechanism in place for any of this? Because I know that the greening measures were around $26,000, but I can't recall the CIP and what the funding avenues were for that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I believe it was a 50-50. I believe they were looking at a budget of 20,000, and they were looking for us to kind of cost share that with 10. So they would be contributing 10 and we'd be contributing 10.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm hearing some mixed messages once again. The request originally, it was 10,000 for greening, then the request was and 6 for facade and 4 for accessibility. For a total of where am I here? 20,000 altogether.
30.
Yeah, I can't add.
It was 20 for the greening and 10 for the CIP work.
I thought okay, I thought you just said it was just half. The request was for half.
Just for the CIP. So through you, Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Cadeau's recollection was the same as mine. I believe the greening part, they were looking at 26 with us, trying to contribute 20,000.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you to the council. I would say that I'm in support for the CIP from the accessibility side, less about the facade. So if it's a matter of us putting money towards helping people access these businesses, that is something I'm in full support of. It's just the real sticking point for me is the facade of businesses. I think that is more of a business expense on the part of the owner than it is a township expense.
I think I don't disagree with you there. I think the intent of the facade was to help the whole sort of image of the downtown core, and that's where that came into play in the past. Just for background, Councillor Cadeau.
I'm going to suggest that we do the 10,000 for the CIP and maybe we look to reduce the 20,000 for the greening. I'm open to what we reduce it by. I can, knock off 5 grand, 10 grand. I mean, where does council sit with this? That's what I'm suggesting. So maybe 10,000 for a CIP and 10,000 for greening, and ask that the BIA come forward with 16,000 to kind of close that loop.
Okay, there's a suggestion there. Council? Yes. Yes, no. Yeah. Indifferent.
Just
Just do something, Richard. Yes.
I think Councillor Burgess. Yeah.
Sorry. How much are we giving St. Jacob? Let's start there.
So through Madam Mayor, right now we are giving them $6,000 in the budget for the garbage pickup. I believe that is all that I can think that we're contributing to them. We have contributed 10,000, I think, the previous 2 years for a public washroom, and that was coming from the municipal accommodation tax. But I mean, their budget will be coming forward very shortly, at least from the St. Jacobs perspective. But yeah, as far as I know, all I recall is we're contributing 6,000 directly right now in 2023.
Okay, and what was the ask for the total for Elmira?
It would be 30,000 in total is the additional ask. So we still have within our 2023 budget, some monies to support the Elmira downtown, with garbage pickup as well. Right. So it's not a contribution to them directly.
Okay, so there's a huge difference between the two BIAs. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I don't want to create the potential for conflict or for future big ask because they're being not balanced. That's my concern. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, just for clarification, we're not matching the greenery. Is that something we'd ever do, is make a conditional, like we'll offer 10 if they match it with 10? Like they have to fund it before we donate our portion?
I think we could do that, Mr. Patrick.
I was going to say yes to you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say that is a stipulation council could make. Yeah, and if I can also add just a little bit, if I may, Madam Mayor, I think the CIP would be something that unfortunately would have to be a levy at this moment in time. But the greenery, I mean, if council saw fit, you probably could make an argument for the climate action greening reserve fund.
Councillor Cadeau.
So I'm just saying it's not wrong. I mean, we can kind of laugh at it, but it is a health and safety hazard for residents down there. So, I mean, I could see it coming from there for sure. And I guess since I have the floor, I'll put forth then, going 50-50, partnering with the BIA for both of the initiatives, CIP and the greening, because that would put us around 13,000, because the contract that they've moving forward, my understanding is for the 26,000, like the delegate had said. So maybe we meet them in the middle.
Council, we keep we keep jumping around on this. Meeting in the middle would be, somebody else put the number out there for me to make sure that I followed correctly. You said 13, Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I mean, you know, if council is looking at saying, because ultimately I think this council's call as to what they wish to contribute or what they don't wish to contribute to the RBIA. If you feel inclined to contribute 13,000, which at least is saying, hey, we want to partner with you 50-50, we can definitely add it into the budget. I think the question comes back into, just as my suggestion, did you want to take it from the Greening Infrastructure Reserve Fund, or whether you want to add this as a levy component? Same with the CIP. I think council has the purview if they want to add the requested 10 or less than, or even more than if they so choose to. But I think that would be a levy hit. And, you know, council, you may choose to say, instead of 6,000 that we're reducing a grant, we're going to kind of shift it over to the RBIA. And maybe that's the answer, is give them $6,000.
So on the greening side, I think what I'm hearing is 13,000 from the greening levy, but needs to be matched with matching funds from the BIA. Is that what I heard? From Councillor Cadeau. Okay. Where does the rest of council stand on that suggestion then? Councillor Burgess?
Sorry, just clarity, that 13 was for just the greenery, or is that for both the CIP and that? Because they were asking for 20 on the greenery.
Correct.
So do we want to be in the middle at 10, or are we doing 13?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, the request for the greenery was, so the project is 26, the request was 20. And I think Council was saying, well, instead of the 20, suggestion was 13, because at least that's half of that cost, projected cost.
Thank you.
Maybe getting too much into the weeds here, but all this greenery is annuals, not perennials, right?
Right.
So like, I don't really see the climate action side of things.
Okay. Mr. Brenneman, help us out.
So, you know, I guess it's appropriate, you know, to also point out, you know, the other side of the equation, which is, I know you're struggling with, do we support? But I guess the other question you have to ask yourself is the majority consensus, there isn't enough support to do anything on either front. So I think for us to be able to move on, I think we need to hear from, you know, Councillor Cadeau has put some potential options and solutions on the table. But I guess we need to hear whether the rest of council is not interested in supporting the facade and the accessibility, and not interested in supporting the greening. I mean, that's another option. You know, I'm just trying to help so we don't spin our wheels in terms of trying, you know, yes, sure, you always try to find a way to see if there's consensus around whether there's something you wish to support. But the other decision council can make is that no, there just isn't enough majority consensus or support for any direction on this item.
Good point. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I can say the only item out of all of it that I would support would be the accessibility portion of it. The greenery is annual, so I don't see it helping as far as climate goes. It's to make things look pretty. And I think the individual stores can put out some greenery. That's my personal thoughts. And I don't support doing the facades. That's up to the buildings. the businesses.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
So I can support the accessibility for sure is 4,000. I do think the township should put some money towards greenery in the interim because we're a few years away from Arthur Street reconstruction to have a proper plan for downtown. And I don't think the businesses downtown of Myers should have to wait until the region and the township and the province can make a plan to get that done. So in the short term, I'm prepared to help them, not to the tune of 20,000 though. If it's 10 or 13, don't care. But somewhere in that neighborhood, I'll support.
Okay. Councillor Burgess, Councillor Grant.
I'm good with what Councillor Schwinn said, if he just wants to make a motion on that. Just
Do you want to, should we do this one as a motion or just agreement? So yes.
17.
So 13 plus 4. Yes. No. Councillor Grant, are you still with us?
I am sorry. It's the joys of rural internet. If I would just say I would concur with Councillor Bryan that I would support the accessibility, but at this point I can't support the signage or the greeting aspect of this project.
Okay, I think we've got majority on the greening and the accessibility to a maximum of 17. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have that too. Yeah, 4 plus 13.
Okay.
So the I guess the last delegation request that started coming forward, and I think council has heard from additional, and it's in your package tonight, is with regards to the climate change, where that the position, see if I get it right. I'm sorry, I have climate change in my notes, but it's the sustainability coordinator position is what I think groups have come forward and requested council consider. So a couple of things I would say, first off is, does council support the position, even in general terms? Do they support that position? And because if they don't, then I think that's going to be a very short discussion. I'd say if they do, then a couple of other questions would be, would you want to see it included in the current draft 2023 budget? And I think we said on one of the budget deliberation nights that it would be roughly about $100,000 all in at this stage of the game. Or would council be looking to request the staff come back at a later date with a more fulsome report talking about the justification for the position, what this position would do, and the sort. And then I think the other thing would be is that if council is looking for staff to come back even in 2023, would they be willing to entertain, at least in the interim, utilizing some of the climate action green infrastructure levy as a funding source, at the very least as an interim? So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll just turn it back to you and take questions the council may have.
Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. Just to the rest of council, just for some context, because I was a member of the WEAC committee and their discussion on this. I know at a previous meeting, Councillor Schwint, and I believe, I can't remember the other councillors that maybe brought up the concerns about lack of kind of goals for this position. The argument for WEAC was that we have a very clear laid out plan within the 50 by 30, 80 by 50, I think is the name, that there's very clear laid out goals for us to achieve within that would maybe provide some direction for that role. I will also share that WEAC members were quite concerned that they would be asked as a volunteer capacity to fill in a gap that we're maybe lacking at the township for clear climate direction. So just sharing kind of some of that perspective, that there is some concern there. In answer to Mr. Petherick's question, I'm full support of a climate action manager. I think it is important. for us to actively work towards these goals. Then the other aspect is I would be also in support of just interim using that greening levy to pay for this position.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
Yeah, this one worries me quite a bit. So I could support asking for a draft justification report in terms of what this person is going to do and accomplish and measurables. To me, without that, we're not being responsible with our planning. What I mean by that is we're worried about a climate emergency. We want to make a difference. We're united on that, but we're just grabbing at straws saying, okay, we'll throw money at it and it's going to make a difference. I haven't heard the staff report saying how it's going to make a difference. We heard about planting trees earlier. To me, that'll make a difference. I can spend $12,000, whatever it is, $50,000 on a project that makes a difference. But we need to have a better, more concrete plan before I can justify $100,000 of tax money. And then the idea of using the infrastructure levy as a stopgap to pay for it. The word was infrastructure, it wasn't staffing. So
Was it climate levy?
was it climate infrastructure levy?
Climate.
Wasn't infrastructure in the title too or not?
No.
Okay,
They're
so I
two
heard.
separate, they're two separate reserves.
Okay. So the climate levy for me was for project, so it wasn't for a staff person. So I don't think it's fair to pull from that budget in my mind. So for that reason, I guess I can't support that position this year until we get more rationale.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I have to agree with Councillor Schwint. I can't support the position. It hasn't had enough justification, and I can't see paying staff out of our climate in climate reserve. We're trying to get the title of that proper. Anyway, I won't support that position.
Councillor Burgess.
For you, Mayor Sean, it's just kind of repeating some of the themes, but yeah, with the other three positions we've looked to hire this year, we've got a nice clean layout of all the details, what they're doing, what their goals are. So I'm not opposed to the position, but I definitely want a lot more thought and details and reports on that of what it's going to look like, what they're going to do, just to be responsible and be able to tell residents what's happening with this money, because 100,000 can go a long way in actual initiatives towards climate change.
Okay. So I think I'm hearing some support for the position, but that we need to have some reports from staff before that support is sort of solidified. So I wonder that there is money in the climate action, and I know there's mixed messages on whether we use that or not, but if we ask staff to come back with a more fulsome report on what that position would look like, what it would do, and how it would help to coordinate all of our initiatives, so a justification report. And if we chose later in the year to go forward with that position, we would be able to find some funds in an interim basis from the climate action reserve if council so chose. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the rest of council. I like that approach because I don't want to just kind of sit on this for a year and wait and see. I don't think that we have that luxury to wait and see anymore. You know, something that one of the constituents had said to me is things that don't get measured don't get managed. So I would suspect that somebody that would come into this role is going to do some benchmarking to see where we're at. So I don't feel as if, you know, this role they're going to come in and not have work to do. That's not the concern at all. It would be quite the opposite. But I also think that we need to reflect back on staff's intentions when they brought forth this budget. It was deliberate in leaving this position out. So I think that, you know, if we reflect back on that, you know, there has to be a reason that it was done. So I'm struggling with this one. I see the value. I still think that staff could do some work in kind of getting us all up to speed with the roles and responsibilities. But I don't want to kind of delay this too long. I don't want to push it till 2024, for instance. I think that we could probably place it in the budget. And if we can fill it June, July, August even, that's better than waiting a whole nother year. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to stop.
I think from the point of view of the commitments that we've made and the immediacy of the climate problems that we're dealing with, the 80 by 50, 50 by 30, and the changes that we're seeing, it's important that we have a consolidated approach and that all our pieces are coming together. So from my point of view, I think this is an important position, but I take the I take the points that were made about let's identify what it looks like and what it's going to be doing before we make a final decision on it. So I think that's a prudent approach, but I would agree with Councillor Cadeau that sooner than later to look at this and to have a fulsome discussion on it.
So is there majority support for a staff report in 2023?
Yeah, yes, majority support for a staff report in 2023. Kayla, you might not have heard that comment. Yes. And in the first half, if we could be so bold, Mr.
Sure.
Brenneman. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Petherick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So next, I want to kind of like move away from delegations and kind of go back into some of our budget discussions and really kind of touch upon back into debentures and kind of walk council through some of the debenture discussions that we've had throughout these deliberations so far. So the three I want to touch on initially is just the I guess the debenture requirements in the 2023 capital budget under infrastructure services. One is the North Sanitary Pumping Station. We have in the budget just over $1 million. You know, at the end of the day, we've had some work that was done in 2022. So I think we're going to be at about a $1.1 million debenture requirement that has an annual repayment of roughly about $82,000 per year. Timing of that, I think we're going to probably start taking that on, I'd say mid 2024, so half a year. You'd see that into the sewer operating budget next year. This one, I would say, is something that was made by previous council, so it's not something that, unless this council chooses not to go through with this project, even though it's already been awarded, and if that is the case, we may want to move into close for that. But staff sees this as this is already a project that's in play. The two that haven't really kind of gone into play yet, one is the Brazil Drain 1 that was in at $1.69 million, which is roughly about $126,000 annual repayment. I would say you're probably looking at starting that repayment somewhere around 2025. Because Jared can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe an engineer's report still has to come back to council for approval. Then it has to go for tender. Then it has to be constructed. Then we'll go through the assessment schedule and then we'll bill out. So I think we're about 2025 by the time that actually plays out. But at the very least, I think from Jared and his staff, they're looking for council support of this project, so at least they can start to move forward on works in 2023. And the last one still is within Jared's area that I want to talk about before I get to Peel Street, because that's a whole other discussion, is with regards to the Greenhouse Road culvert. And that was a debenture requirement of roughly about $850,000, and that annual repayment is about $63,000. Timing, depending on when the project is done, could be starting repayment in mid 2024, again, so a half year repayment, or potentially starting in 2025. I think Jared said in his presentation that you could probably, if council so choose to, sort of push this project off by a year, but after that, I think we're looking at potentially closing the bridge if council is not supportive of the project at all. So I want to start there before then we get into Peel Street, because that's a whole, as I said, a whole other discussion.
So I would say, based on what I think I just heard, the North Pumping Station is something that's already been awarded.
Correct.
So I would suggest we leave that one alone.
Yep.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. We need to move forward with the Breslaw drain. There has been cases of flooding in some of the homes, and there are issues there. So I don't think we can afford to put that one off. The homeowners need to be looked after in that particular case. And I agree with Jared, we have to deal with the greenhouse road reconstruction of that bridge as well. Because with all the development in Hopewell Crossing, we don't want to start closing bridges with that many new homes.
Councillor Cadeau and then Schwint.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, just general comment. I have no concerns with any of those debentures that you had listed off there, Richard.
So yeah, I completely support the 3 projects, but I am a little bit concerned after last week's committee of the whole meeting. We had a budget presented on the water and sewer infrastructure, sewer rates for 2023. It was mentioned there's no money left in reserve funds because of the industrial drive project. And we aren't making any allowances this year to start building reserves for projects we're debenturing next year and the year after. To me, that just doesn't make sense to wait for a staff report or a consultant report in a year's time to say, oh, we need to raise levy 15% to pay for infrastructure we're behind on. We should be acting this year. So I'm wondering if we need to revisit that decision on what rates should be for 2023, I guess it is, on the water and sewer side.
Yeah, I'll let you answer that. And then my question sort of that was twigged with that is how does the infrastructure levy fit into these projects going forward?
So through Madam Mayor, on Councillor Swin's question, so right now, yes, from the committee of the whole perspective, and I think it was ratified by council, it was just bringing it forward. If council still wants us to look at increasing the service charges that we have on our water and sewer bills, right now they're they're $26 a piece bi-monthly, so 26 for water, 26 for sewer. You know, if in it, I think as I said last week, you know, those rates haven't changed since 2005. So if council's interested in looking at us bringing it forward when we bring the budget back on February the 14th of actually having higher numbers for that, we can definitely make that change and propose something in a draft bylaw at that time, if council's supportive of that.
Council, any thoughts? Councillor Cadeau.
We've gone such a long time without raising rates. If we raise them too much, too quickly, it's going to be really hard for individuals who are on a fixed budget to be able to afford. So I would suggest maybe we go a little bit slower, go with what we had proposed this year, and then maybe we revisit it next year. You know, where any increase may not come with such the sticker shock.
Other comments? Okay.
Really, it's
Well-
pay now or pay later. So it's just, when are we gonna do it? So
Yeah,
raising a concern because the sticker shock next year will be a whole lot worse then. But I know the levy rate this year is a sticker shock for many people, but I'm afraid it's gonna be the same next year too. So putting it off scares me.
so you're talking about water and wastewater. Remind me, I think the increase for next year is similar to this year, isn't it?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, my understanding is at least the sewer charges from the region are again 4.9 as far as I recall.
And do you have concerns with the level of our reserves?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, I would definitely say yes. because, I think as Councillor Schwinn pointed out, we're needing to take on debenturing. This would be the second sanitary sewer debenture that we're going to be taking on. We've been okay on the water side, but again, I think we're at that crunch point, and Jared can probably chime in and speak to you guys all night if you wanted to about all the needs on the underground infrastructure. We're just coming to a press point on that.
Okay. Council. I think I'm not getting a whole lot of jumping on increasing that for this year. So I'm thinking we just leave it as it stands. I think what I heard is the 3 projects that were listed, that there's support for those 3.
Sure, absolutely. And through you, Madam Mayor, you had a question on how infrastructure reserve fund fits in all of this?
Yeah. So I mean, we have the infrastructure reserve each year, that piece that increases as we increase the levy. And how is that, like, is that just taken up in the budget? Or is that set aside for specific things? Or how can we consider those funds in that particular reserve?
Yeah, so through Madam Mayor, and for the reminder of council, so right now, as of the 2022, we had $1.4 million built up that is being contributed to that reserve fund every single year. The 2023 budget has an additional 193,000 being proposed, so that is the 1.5% levy increase that staff are proposing to add to the infrastructure levy, and in turn the infrastructure reserve fund. That's where it'd be headed to. And then the expenditure side is it is proposed through the various budgets, primarily within the capital budget. I'd say 99% of it's in the capital budget. But I would say even to that reserve fund, Madam Mayor, we, as soon as it goes in, we spend it as soon as it goes in, because we just have so many infrastructure needs.
Okay, thank you. So we've dealt with the three debenture projects and said we support them. What's left is Peel Street Bridge. And I'm just before you go there, I'm going to ask council. It is past 9:30. Do you want to deal with that tonight, or do you want to leave that for February 14th when the budget comes forward? Your call. Apparently the agenda that night is fairly light. Clerk Smith assures me. Councillor Grant.
Well, now that I hear that it's light, maybe, but I was going to say I'm in favor of just continuing discussion on the Peel Street. I think we've pushed it off long enough, and I don't think this decision is going to get easier, whether we do it tonight or on the 14th.
Okay. Councillor Bryant.
I'm just going to say I support the bridge, so it's up to the 3 guys, I think, basically where this goes.
I saw a thumbs up from Councillor Burgess to carry on with the discussion. So, Mr. Petherick, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think the 2 things. One, staff are proposing to have this as a debenture in 2023, the tune of $2.75 million. That has an approximate annual repayment of $205,000. The timing, depending on when tenders are released and brought back in construction, you're looking at starting in 2024, potentially starting even in 2025. I think council recalled in the 2023 budget package that was sent out, there are a number of reports from previous council with regards to the subject matter, and staff provided additional background information in council this week. So hopefully council had an opportunity to review that. I think really it gets back into a couple of things that I'm thinking about is, one, does council support the project in itself? If they support the project in itself, then now it's a matter of timing. Are we going to be looking at starting this in 2023, or the council want to shift that into another year? So that's the one thing. I think the other side of it is if council doesn't support the project, we still have an approved council EA in process where it is to be converted to a pedestrian bridge. So if council wanted to do something different, to say, we want to have it like a full, vehicle bridge. No, we want to have a new bridge. No, we don't want anything at all. You're going to have to open up that EA. So I think that's really the crux is, does council still support the bridge being converted to a pedestrian crossing? And if so, timing. If not, what direction would you like to go?
Okay, let's take it in that order. Does council support the previous council's direction for a pedestrian bridge? Yes. No. Yes. No. All right, this is just like the last council. Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Bletherick, the 205,000 per year, is that on a 10-year or a 20-year repayment?
That's a good question. Through Madam Mayor, that's a 20-year.
Okay. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the rest of the council. I know I've said this at previous meetings, but I think it's just worth reiterating. I think this is going to be a debenture project, regardless if we do it this year or next year. So pushing it off a year, for me, just doesn't make any sense. When it comes to reopening the EA, I would not be in support of that. Council has done their due diligence, the previous council, in regarding to what is the best decision for that. I think if we were to rebuild that bridge, maybe Councillor Bryant could correct me, but I think that would remove the historical element of it by doing a full rebuild. So at this point, I'm in full support of a pedestrian bridge, and I think we owe it to the people of Winterburn to get it done.
Hey. Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Yeah, this is a tough decision. I just feel like I'm in a catch-22 in the sense of this council wasn't part of the last process, the long process of lots of discussion, engagement with residents, with staff, EAs on different options. And at the end of the day, the last council made a commitment to the people of Winterburn. I just find it hard to now come into this new role, not being part of any of that, and all of a sudden flipping the decision when a commitment was already made. So that's kind of where I stand right now on that.
Okay, Councillor Schwint, I think you were next, and then Councillor Cadeau.
You make a good point, Councillor Burgess, about rehashing the decision. When I look back at those conversations, I think they were long and ongoing because there wasn't a good option presented. The pedestrian only bridge was the least of the evils. And I don't think anybody was really happy with the answer. So why are we going ahead with a bad decision because it's the least of the evils? Maybe we need to spend some time and get the best of options that adds value to the township. I hear the Winterburn residents and how we haven't provided amenities for them. So why are we taking away the one thing we have provided? Well, did we provide the right thing? Talk to them for the Mennonite community. I mentioned the dollar figures involved, and he just said, not worth it. For the amount of use it gets, there's other options. We don't need that bridge for that reason. I know that's not a pedestrian problem, but it goes to speak to, we have to put some value with this. So normally I hate delaying, but I'll put off bad decisions to try and get a better one. And this is where I'm at.
Councillor Burgess. Or sorry, did I skip somebody? Councillor Cadeau, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to wait my turn again. Through you to Councillor Burgess, I think that what's prudent to recognize is that even though the previous council didn't make this decision, it was a split decision. It wasn't unanimous, right? So let's not forget that fact. And perhaps this council is the space for sober second thoughts around this decision, making sure that it is the best decision in the interest of all of the residents of Woolwich. To Councillor Grant's point, this is going to have to be a debenture unless it doesn't, and that's because we don't go forward with it. It has to be a debenture because it's so expensive that we couldn't justify increasing taxes 2,000%. But we're still doing that. It's just over the span of 20 years, $205,000 per year. Director Plethoric, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to absorb that payment this year, it'd be a 2% increase in the tax levy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you'd be pretty close to it. You'd be shy of it. It's 2% is about 250,000. So you're close to it.
So to follow up, is council prepared in making a 2% increase over the next 20 years to support the building of this bridge?
Councillor Burgess and then Councillor Bryant.
Just a Councillor Cadeau's comment there. Yes, it is a large cost. Just for clarification, it's a one-time 2% that technically would carry forward. It's not like we need to increase it 2% every year. Just for clarification.
Yes. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I know the previous council had looked at options, and I believe replacing the bridge was going to cost $5 to $6 million. Is that not the number that they had looked at?
Mr. Poupey, can you remind us?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Bryant. I think that's pretty accurate. It might have been, there was a number of numbers being thrown around at the time. I think it was 5 to 9 million. I think it went as high as that, but I think it's more accurate what you indicated. And if I had an opportunity to, just regarding Councillor Grant's comment about the heritage piece, just for clarification for all, if it was to be reopened and revisited, there's lots of ways to still respect the heritage value of the current bridge, even if a new decision was to be presented that would involve replacement. So, for example, Cambridge has done, they have the Black Bridge bridge, but they've made that pedestrian and built another vehicular bridge next to it is kind of how they've done that. So there's options still to investigate, and that would be the piece that really wasn't explored during the EA process. It was something that we just looked at, replacement, pedestrian removal based on funding levels.
Right, and that was going to go to a full concrete bridge, was it not? And it was going to cost 5 to 6 million and still need the turnarounds?
If you had sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Bryant, if you had a brand new vehicular bridge, right, you would not do the turnarounds any longer. You would just have straight through access, so you could save that cost.
Okay, so we'd still be looking at 5 to 6 million to replace it, though.
Again, high level, maybe it's 4 million, depends what we do. I mean, you could take there's so many options, I guess, is the challenge with this whole replacement idea, because you could essentially remove the current bridge, put those side rails on, even though they wouldn't have any structural piece to them at all. So there's lots of things you could do, where you could build another bridge beside it. It's an exploratory effort that really wasn't done at the time. We sort of did high level, and I think that's why you had that wide range in price. And that's typically what an EA does. It flies very high, looks at big picture items, big picture pricing, and then you drill into the weeds with the detailed design piece. So that's kind of, I just would hazard, I don't want to nail a number down. I think you've got a lot of flexibility on what that replacement number could be, depending on what we would want to do with it.
Thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I don't want to drag this project on and go through what the last council did, but is there any quick or efficient way to engage the Winterburn public one last time, just for this council, just get feedback, or is that a bad idea?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. I think we need to know what it is we're asking the community and where we're prepared to go with it.
It's
Go, Councillor Burgess, were you gonna make another comment?
just follow up on that. Thank you. I don't know exactly what I'm asking either, but before I reverse the decision of the previous council, I feel like I want to at least kind of hear from them a bit more. I know we have the reports and everything, but I don't know, just to see even who shows up, and you can gauge commitment a bit when you see them in person and all that.
Mr. Poupey, were you wanting to weigh in?
Sure, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. So we are under an EA process. The EA is complete. The direction was to convert the bridge to pedestrian only. That is the option before us. If you were to go back to the public seeking input outside of that, then I think the process would be to reopen the EA. And I guess it would be to Mayor Shantz's point is what the intent of the engagement was. We did a fulsome engagement with at least 2 meetings, which was beyond the scope that required of the EA, and had extensive conversation at both of those meetings as far as public engagement went to land where we have.
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Thanks for that comment. Yeah, I'm not necessarily wanting to open up the EA process again on do we do a pedestrian, do we do a vehicle bridge or whatnot. Just again, see how many people show up, see their comments, see the engagement, just in the general sense, so they can share their stories, their history with it and their thoughts. So we just have that perspective before it's just a go ahead or not kind of thing.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I can appreciate, wanting to make sure that you've fully engaged with the community, but I would offer that you probably aren't going to hear much that you haven't already heard. Perhaps we should consult with the rest of Woolwich and get their opinion on, what they feel is priorities as far as our spending, and whether or not the Peel Street Bridge should be one of those main priorities.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you to the rest of the council. I don't know if engaging the rest of Woolwich is fair, because there's a larger population dispersal across the rest of Woolwich that you could really skew your metrics on that. I think what we'll get is we'll just get confirmation bias that it's not something the rest of Woolwich wants.
I'm going to go in a different direction on this, bring up the historical aspect, because I'm hearing mixed messages. I've got hearing one side of the community saying this is a historical bridge, so that's got value and we need to preserve it because of that. But then the questions raised, well, if it's got historical value, there's probably opportunities to get grants and funding because it is historical, and those upper tier governments tend to have support for that. And I've quickly heard that no, the odds of getting any money from upper tiers for that is pretty low. So is there historical significance or is there not? Then let's find out where that value is and how we capture that value from the other governments before we make a commitment. And make sure that we plan the design so it respects what those funding agencies want.
Councillor Bryan, did you want to jump in?
Thank you. It does have historical value. We only have 2 steel truss bridges left in all of Woolwich. We are losing the Middlebrook Bridge, which was our 3rd. It's due to be torn down. The Glasgow Street Bridge, we did get money from the provincial end. I believe the federal government chipped in for that one as well. It's been rebuilt a few times and people keep destroying them because they won't keep their vehicles off, which they should be. Peel Street, I really don't know what to tell you. It does have historical value, but as far as funding, it's a very difficult thing to get for historical properties, and it has to be designated to get it. And if we're not already designated, that creates another problem. So we'd have to move forward with the designation process too. So our hands are kind of tied at this point with what we can move forward with, because we're not going to get funding for it.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the rest of the council. I would agree with Councillor Bryant on this. I also have a suspicion that funding for heritage buildings are far and few spread out, that there's a lot of buildings looking for funding, and the provincial and federal government need to be judicious in what they're picking. So I think the odds of us getting a grant from it are low to begin with. And then on top of that, we're talking about delaying a process that's already been delayed for several years on the off chance that we may get a grant. And I just think, again, it comes back down to what's fair. And the residents have been clear that they've been waiting a long time for this. And at this point, I'm not willing to say that I want to wait and see if we'll get a grant on a chance, only for us to not get that grant and then be back where we're at 6 months or a year from now.
Councillor Schwint and then Cadeau.
Well, if that's the case, I don't think we should be using historical significance as an argument on this bridge rehabilitation, because the funding bodies are saying we're not prepared to invest time and energy in designating it a heritage structure. So we don't believe it is. So let's not use that as an argument for going ahead and fixing it. There's other arguments we can use, but I think we need to take that one out of the equation or go through the process and see if we can get some money.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, has any staff member, I should rephrase, wrote a grant for this specific project?
I'll take that. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau. Not on this particular bridge that I'm aware of. We've tried, I believe we did 3 applications for Glasgow. Just regarding the grant applications, I think the piece that we were successful on was we were moving all forms of like it was multimodal, it was vehicular and pedestrian, horse and buggy community to connecting. That was really helpful in being successful in the grant. I think we will struggle just because it's pedestrian only with no facilities on either side. I think that's where we struggle with this bridge. If there was a different option, it might, and again, you can't guarantee upper government funding, but it might be easier to ascertain money that way. So that's what I would offer, I guess.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, Director Poupé. We've been talking a lot as council on our thoughts and opinions. I don't know if I can put you on the spot here if you want to defer this, but can we hear from staff again what their recommendation is, or should that be another night?
Mayor Shantz.
What do you want to tell us, Jared?
yeah, that's a tough one. I guess just the process. I think that from staff's perspective, some may have heard this. I think that when you look at the dollar amount, and this does bleed into, not having enough revenue to support, certainly in the levy side of things, to support all the infrastructure renewals. And Councillor Bryant was correct in that we had 3 steel truss bridges, all historical value. One reason staff never didn't need to designate because they felt they were under the public purview anyway, and that was really it. When you have a private residence, obviously it's very important to designate for heritage value so that you don't have a private owner do anything with it. And that was sort of staff's perspective on the heritage aspect. So we recognize that they're all very significant from a heritage perspective, all 3 bridges. But at the time, and again, it's a snapshot in time, so lessons learned always, when we were going through the EAs in around 2017, funding just was non-existent. We just didn't have the funding. It was from a staff perspective, it was more a want as opposed to a need. There were alternate routes, that sort of thing. So staff were very laser focused, I will say, on funding and revenue. And because of our annual funding, we were unable to support it. And that's really why the recommendation sort of flowed the way it was. It was predominantly dollar driven. And then I think this council can appreciate all of the engagement that happened around Peel Street. And now we see the dollar amount. We're faced with the same challenges, that our annual funding for bridges is still less than what we're at, what we're asking to spend on this for a pedestrian conversion. So it's really a council decision. I think I can only give history here, and I think that's something that staff would certainly do going forward. Would have an option, as through the EA process always looks at, do nothing is always an option through an EA. You're really vetting options. Another option obviously needs to be considered a fiscal, but then another one needs to say, what if money wasn't an option? What would be the preferred option if we had revenue streams to support that structure? So I think from that vantage point, that was a lesson that staff took away from all of these EAs. through all of these bridges. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it might provide some background anyway.
Councillor Grant, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I did. It was more about the regarding the historical nature of the bridge, and that I just wanted to point out the designation alone does not determine the value of something's historical worth. As Mr. Poupet kind of pointed out, that the designation is important for when it's a private residence, simply because they can make changes. But I would also just say that much like I was pointing out that getting funding for historical buildings is hard, there is a limited amount of time and resources for people to do the designation. So just because something hasn't been designated as historical significance doesn't mean it isn't of significance.
Okay, Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, a couple of points that were made that I just wanted to pick up on. First, Councillor Bryant, you had suggested that there's some traffic passing over some other pedestrian bridges in our municipality. So I guess I would be concerned about whether or not that's happening or could potentially happen with this pedestrian bridge. So I'll just leave it there, because I think that that's an important component, especially if it's even buggy traffic. What is the risk associated with the pedestrian bridge?
Yeah, that wasn't a pedestrian bridge, but go ahead, Bonnie.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Glasgow Street Bridge is not a pedestrian bridge. It is a one-way bridge now, and people are trying to drive both ways on it. And we had one actually that was caught just a few weeks ago. Residents are starting to take pictures of vehicles that are not complying with the rules. But that bridge has been damaged by vehicles going through there that shouldn't be. But it is a vehicle bridge.
There was a farm vehicle that went through and caused damage, and so it was closed for a short period of time, sometime in the last 6 months, I think. So yeah.
So perhaps this is for Director Poupet. Would there be mechanisms in place to prevent traffic from crossing the bridge? And maybe this is just too far in the weeds, I don't know, or maybe that's to be determined, but I think that would be a prudent thing to determine.
I think that was part of the pedestrian piece, but go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, no, thank you through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau. That's right. It was all dealt with and vetted at the time, the EA and through the decisions and the detailed design stage. So it has a stop, up and close. It will no longer be a public road, open road. It's a closed road. We'll have that limits our liability and risk. It becomes occupiers' liability from an insurance standpoint. And then we will do some treatments at either end of the structure to prevent that. That was a big piece for debate, was permitting pedestrian only versus how do we allow for horse and buggy, snowmobiles. But at the end of the day, it is pedestrian only, no motorized vehicles, and unfortunately no horse and buggy vehicles, simply because we always said this before, is if anybody can come up with a way to allow horse and buggies and prevent vehicles, I think they'll make a lot of money, and we would be very happy to enact anything like that. But that is a real challenge.
Councillor Schwinn.
Well, I'm kind of curious how much it cost to fix the fix on the Glasgow Bridge last year when that happened, because I think it's a real risk of something similar happening potentially at this fix. But I'm also wondering about other ideas that could add value to Winterburn, the community, more so than this bridge. So I just pulled up the GIS map that we learned about earlier. What if we investigated building or connecting Peel Street to the Kissing Bridge Trail along the river? I bet that, I don't know, I'm going to speculate here, but could we investigate doing that for less than 2.7 million? That would get I think a lot more use, a lot more beauty, and closer to nature than the bridge would. Add more value, less money. Like, those are the type of ideas I'd like to think about a little bit, that Winterburn residents might be really happy with, and we might be happy with the outcome too.
Councillor Grant.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to this council, I think part of the impetus behind the bridge and the pedestrian version of it was so that there is a connection between the two halves of Winterburn. Why I think the Kissing Bridge Trail would be a great addition. I think it would still leave us with the fact that residents aren't able to access part of the community because they can't cross the river.
I'm sorry, can you expand that a little bit? I'm like, what's on the other side of the river that from a community?
So just for some context, when I spoke with residents of Winterburn, they have friends, they have family across the other side that they use that bridge to get across to go and visit, as opposed to getting into a car, driving down Catherine Street and going around, or walking down Catherine Street, which is a busy road for a pedestrian. That is part of the aspect of the bridge, is that it is a connection for the community.
So we're at a quiet moment. I guess the only thing I would add to the conversation is if the support is to go ahead with the bridge at some point, the costs aren't getting less as we move forward, at least they haven't in the last years. You know, if the decision and if the will of this council is to go ahead with it, just keep in mind that the cost is not going to be less if we put it off for a number of years. So, council, where do we go? I think Councillor Bryant and Councillor Grant have made it clear that they're in support of going ahead with the debenture and with the bridge. I think Councillor Burgess was in favor.
As of right now.
As of right now. So Councillor Grant and Councillor Bryant are saying, let's do now. Quick, stop the discussion. Councillor Cadeau.
No, it's not something I can get behind at this point.
Okay. Councillor Burgess, you wanted to say some more?
Just, sorry, I don't want to drag it on, but I'm open to other suggestions, and that's kind of why I talked about meeting Winterburn residents, because like what Councillor Schwint just brought up, there's other great ideas. If I'm going to vote no to this, I want a concrete solution that will be implemented in the next year or two kind of thing, and not just, we'll do something sometime. So that's kind of where I stand. And I don't know if there's anything we can actually do in the short term or a plan, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Schwinn.
This isn't fair, but I'm going to ask Mayor Shantz, can you put some context on the last council's decision-making process, conversations you heard, some points you thought were important or we haven't heard, and any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I'll do my best. There were it was a split decision, and it wasn't a split decision whether to maintain the bridge. The decision was split on what the bridge would look like. So would it be a traffic bridge or would it be a pedestrian only bridge? That's where the push came on that council. There was, I guess from my point of view, I think once you once you give up a river crossing, it's really hard to get a river crossing back. And so I know we've run across that before. So I'm reluctant to give up the river crossing. My personal view, I would have liked to see it accessible for buggies and pedestrians and recreational vehicles. I understand not putting automobiles across it. I'm not an engineer. The engineers tell me that's impossible. So I guess I have to take them at their word for that. What else can I tell you? Yeah, the council was was basically behind maintaining the bridge. It was more of how much would we spend on it and what kind of access would it be? Would it be a full rebuild and allow traffic or just the pedestrian? I don't know, Mr. Brenneman, am I missing something in there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, I don't think you're missing anything. And my only contribution at this stage would be, yes, at this point in time, there's, three that seem to be leaning towards, moving ahead and two that are not. However, I think the natural question is, if this isn't going to be resolved tonight, is there any additional information that staff could make sure to bring forward in advance or part of the February 14th final meeting to help you make your final decision?
I think there's one thing that we haven't really talked about this evening that just came to mind, and that is the bylaw or direction on the books about the magnitude of a debenture that we would allow, total debentures that we would allow in the township. And I know we were quite conservative in that, but can you put the current slate of projects in perspective in that regard? I don't remember what those numbers were.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I don't remember them off the top of my head either, but when we did look at it as part of the budget report, we said that, the previous councils ago that made that decision, if you were to kind of say, well, you would want to put that number to $2023 with the existing population that we have, because the population has grown. So that debt per capita, these projects would still fit within that guidance.
How much extra, I suppose, how much leeway would we have for another project that might come up, an emergency project or something like that?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I mean, it's something I'll have to take a look at and sort of give a more fulsome answer to council at a later date, sometime this week, but I don't believe we were at the ceiling.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Schwint.
See, remarks about the conversation last council had got me thinking, and I think this council should be also thinking about what is this price differential now between a vehicle bridge and its pedestrian bridge. I'll be honest, I don't think I can be talked into supporting a pedestrian only bridge, but a vehicle bridge is another 1.7 million. Might be more palatable than a pedestrian only bridge. So I know I don't like spending money and spending even more. I can't believe I'm saying it, but if we're going to get value out of it, then it might be easier to justify in my mind.
Mr. Petherick and Mr. Poupey, can you, for the February 14th meeting, bring us those numbers again from the EA and from that report? I think you did possibly send it to us, but maybe if you can bring it and have it in an easy readable chart for us to look at for February 14th, or maybe just send it whenever you can put it together ahead of that meeting. And maybe the information on the debentures too, and where we stand. Excuse me on that. Is there something else, Councillor Cadeau?
Yeah, just through you, Mayor, to Councillor Schwint. That sounds more palatable to me than the pedestrian bridge as well. So put that to the rest of council to consider, I suppose. Are you firm on a pedestrian bridge, or does it make more sense to have some vehicular traffic go over this?
Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, Director Poupey, what would be the time frame around looking at this again? Just don't want to drag it out too much for residents.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess, just for clarity, so if council was to want to shift gears and investigate another bridge option, which would be for vehicular traffic, then what would happen is we would need to either do an amendment or open up the EA again. And you'd probably spend the better part of 23 completing that and having more public engagement, coming up with additional design options, vetting that process again at the council table, and then making a direction later this year. And then you would definitely need all of 24 for design, potentially into 25. So you'd be constructing probably in 26.
Explain to me again why we can't use the information, excuse me, and statistics from the EA that we've already done when we've considered those options, when the EA is good for 10 years.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to you and council, because the file's closed, the decision was made. It went through the process as identified through the environmental assessment process, and there was a closure to that. We notified, the file's done, so the EA is finished and complete with that decision. So you've now got 10 years to enact that decision. If you want to change the decision, you either have to do a new EA or create an amendment, which we think you can just do an amendment to this EA. But it will require more public engagement, and it will require us to notify in the paper again, and then notify of what the decision would be. And I think it's important to understand that if we do an amendment, and if it was council's will to investigate vehicular options, I think you still do need to throw out all the options on the table again, like do nothing, stay the course, another vehicular option, and then you would probably have more vehicular options, looking at, you know, twinning the bridge, removing the bridge, doing that sympathetic construction piece to support heritage. So I think there's probably more involved in that definitely would warrant at least a meeting, maybe even two, depending on the kind of engagement we get. But that's why you can't, and that's why the EA process is in place, is so that you don't have one council flip-flopping on another council without going through the public process.
I don't have a problem with the public process, but there's a lot of information and a lot of work that was done. And I'm assuming we don't throw that all out, that we can reuse a lot of it. And I guess hence you said an amendment.
That's correct. Yeah, no, it's not lost effort. There's no question about it. It's not lost effort. I think there's just more additional information regarding vehicular bridges in particular would just need to be the exercise. Everything else would stay valid.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. One thing I think we need to consider, if we push this back and start waiting 3-4 years to get it completed, our costs are just going to go up and up and up. So are we going to be any further ahead at the end of that 4-year period than what we are now? We'll be behind.
I think that the question that the other councillors are bringing up is do we want to switch to a vehicular bridge? And if that's the direction we want to go, then yeah. When remind me again, were we prepared to start building this year, or we're just doing design this year?
Oh, to you, Mayor Shantz, we were prepared to construct this year.
Yeah. Okay. David.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to council, just thinking and reflecting a little bit on you know, Councillor Schwint's question about you know, what other discussions and debates happen around the council table. You know, I think the other part, you know, was trying to digest the input from the Winterburn residents. You know, and a lot of that had to do with the fact, and you've seen this in the emails, that, you know, as a community, you know, back in 2008 and 9, when we were on a very aggressive recreational capital facilities campaign, it wasn't like, you know, we built a community center there. It's not like we have built a major accessible park playground there. It's not like, you know, we've built a gymnasium there. And, you know, it was interesting. It was interesting to hear from the residents at the time to say, you know, even with the pedestrian only bridge, they as residents, I understand a number of you are trying to look at the bigger picture, but they as residents were trying to say, you know, we would just like to have something that allowed us to get out in all seasons and walk and live a healthy, active life by using a pedestrian bridge that was open. And it's interesting as you reflect now as council on costs. When I look back, I believe for example, I believe the gymnasium in Breslau, I think, cost about $2.2 million. So Richard could correct me, but I think so it was around $2.2 million. I have no idea what that gymnasium would cost today, but I know it wouldn't be $2.2 million. It would be a lot more. And, I don't know whether that does or doesn't help, in terms of another piece of additional information as we head into, final budget night on February the 14th. But I do respect very much the debate the council's having tonight. And that's always the struggle that councils will have and staff has, which is looking at the various picture and, what is the best decision, in terms of the broader tax base, and what's that ultimate decision. But at the same time, I think because Councillor Schwinn had asked, if you would have been here, I mean, the residents were very passionate about wanting, at the very least, a pedestrian only, because it would be their one and only form of really recreational pursuit in terms of active, healthy living. So just something else to consider as you're heading into the 14th, because I'm not sure I'm seeing a final direction or decision tonight.
Councillor Schwinn.
Following up from Mr. Brenneman, if I could, I forgot to ask questions a week or two ago on budget, and you reminded me again that I should. As a new council, we've had some conversations. What have we forgotten to ask? And what should this council be thinking about as we make that final decision on the 14th? There's some areas you're surprised we haven't brought up?
Okay, before we get to that, that's a good question. Are we finished with Peel Street for tonight, Mr. Petherick?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I think really what I hear so far is 3 out of the 5 support at the very least leaving it in for the moment to be able to brought forward to the final decision on February the 14th.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and with a little more information provided on the information behind the past decision and the EA information made available before that date.
Yep.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, I obviously I've had a bit of time to be able to reflect on that question because it was floated out there. And I'm not just saying this in any sort of patronizing way. Senior management has reflected on the fact that this has been a very interesting process for us. While to date there may not have been a change in terms of the actual rate, there's been a lot of debate and discussion over the course of multiple meetings, and sometimes on the same topic, even with respect to the 3 staffing positions. Council was looking for us to come back and provide further justification. So when I reflect on are there things, I'm hard pressed to think what they would be, because council has asked questions relative to the operating budget, but you've also made comments to say it's pretty tight. I'm not sure what we would do. And you've also heard our director of finance say, that even if you were trying to make any sort of adjustments, keep the operating budget intact, because that's ultimately where we deliver the core services and programs and maintenance and facility upkeep and things of that nature. If you were going to adjust anything, it would be, in the capital. But even with the capital, the concern over that you can see relates to the fact that we still are fighting an infrastructure deficit, just like any other municipality in Ontario and Canada, and the realities that we're facing with that. So, I'm I'm hard pressed to think, that you haven't either asked us or debated amongst yourself. And even tonight, you want to be reminded of information, while we may have provided before, you want to be reminded of it again so that you actually are digesting everything before making a final decision. Case in point, remind us, as the mayor asked, what our debt per capita limit was established, accounting for inflation. And, again, you're making decisions around, as I said, at a previous meeting, these are the decisions that the average family is making around the kitchen table. What level of debt is appropriate for the family at this point in time, that sort of thing. So my only other comment I would make on your question is this, is that, I think from having almost 3 complete changeovers on council now within the last 16 years, you will start as a council maybe to get a better sense, in the coming term on other things that you want to see as we go through our strategic plan, and that will help inform priorities and the direction for this wonderful community going forward. But I think that's the difficulty, as the mayor even acknowledged before. The timing of municipal elections is awful. In terms of throwing council into a budget so soon early in your term. So, in the end, I'll say this because I always like to draw a sense of humor. I hope you appreciate my political answer because I totally avoid your question.
Okay. Mr. Patrick, with that, can you summarize where we're at?
So Madam Mayor, I'll try to put it at least into somewhat of a financial term as opposed to a political one. So really decisions from council tonight, we didn't make any decisions on the 6,000 grant savings that we're going to see. Some suggestions on allocating it somewhere else, maybe in a reserve, maybe somewhere else. Council has made the decision to support some of the requests from the BIA, 4,000 for the accessibility portion of the CIP, 13,000 for the their greening project. So really, you're talking about you're adding like $11,000 to the budget, and right now that would be a levy source. So you're at like 8.58 is kind of where you're sitting at. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say to council, when we come back on the 14th, it'd be nice if we kind of had a direction from you to say, if it's not 8 point whatever, what is it? Because I think from a staff level, we're going to need some time to be able to go through stuff and to be able to bring back some, I would say, well thought out suggestions for council to consider. Because I think, as Mr. Brenneman, pointed out, it's a tough go this year. My comments were true. I think we've been leaned down on our operating budget so much in the previous years that we want to, at least my goal is to try to contain it and keep it as whole as much as possible. But then you heard some of the challenges we're having on our infrastructure side. So that's a tough go as well.
So I think Mr. Patrick's ask was on the 14th, don't come and chop percentages out of the budget randomly. If I can summarize it fairly bluntly and not very politically. If there is and in all seriousness, if there is a real concern with where we continue to land, which is in the range of 8.5, let's state that now so that staff can do some work and we can wrestle with it. Bonnie.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Bryant.
I've heard from a number of residents that have a big concern with the 8.5 number. And I did get an email on the weekend, which I circulated to all of council. And there was one comment that he put in his email that's basically struck a nerve, I think. And it was, affordable taxes are a component of an affordable housing. And this is a gentleman that's a singles sole supporter, and he's finding it tough to continue based on some further conversations. So I think that's what we have to take a look at is, can people afford an 8.5% tax increase? And that's what I'm struggling with, because I've had a lot of people contact me, and in their minds, they don't feel it's affordable, because when you start adding in the region's portion, the school board's portion, it's not just $86. It could be $300-400 depending on their house values. So people are struggling, and they are reaching out.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I just want to commend staff on bringing forward this budget in the way that it was. I think that having spent so much time going through the minutia of it and arriving where we've arrived at says a lot to staff. So I'd be remiss to not to state that. As far as really trying to find efficiencies now, I'm just going to reiterate. I mean, we're looking forward to next year, and we're going to be levying a 2% tax increase because of the Peel Street Bridge. So if we're really debating fractions of a percentage this year, I would just go back to the Peel Street Bridge and the 2% that it's going to cost us next year. And how can we justify that if we're really struggling to cut a, fraction of a percentage?
Councillor Schwint.
So if I can understand what you said, Mayor Shantz, really next week or in 2 weeks, we're not debating the percentages, we're debating expenditures. So to reduce the percentage, we've got to reduce expenditures.
Yes.
We can't just reduce the percentage. And we haven't done a very good job of cutting anything in the last few weeks. We've gone through a lot of things and they've stayed in. So Councillor Cadeau makes a good point.
I don't know that I confirmed, but I would be happy to support the 8.5 plus, whatever that was, Dr. Petherick.
Okay, I'm Councillor Grant.
I was just going to say I would also support the 8.58 that Mr. Petherick has brought forward.
Okay, I think in the aggregate, the council is supporting the 8.5, 8.58 in that range. And then we're not going to come back on the 14th and require a whole lot of major cuts. Fair? Yes. Okay. Okay. Is there anything else you need from us this evening?
No, Madam Mayor, I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. Kind of funny that one item took up a good chunk of tonight's night.
Peel Street Bridge.
No, thank you.
Okay. Thanks again to you and to staff for going through this, and we'll look forward to another fulsome discussion on the 14th. And hopefully with some more information, we can figure out where we want to go with the Peel Street Bridge. I think that brings us to the end of our budget discussions for this evening. So thank you. It's getting late. I don't have a whole lot to report on regional matters. I forward the summaries from our meetings to you, and they get reported out to the public in many different forms. So I'm going to pass on that tonight. Council reports and updates, anything? No. Outstanding activity list? No. There are no notices of motion. We need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 05/2023 to 12-2023, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. And you can read those. I don't think I'm going to read them all out this evening. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Cadeau and Councillor Schwint, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda, unless someone has something else. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that is carried. And so thank you to all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. I'll remind council to stay connected until we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. And I would also say thank you to council for your engaged discussion all through the budget process. It's been a very good discussion, and we've got one more night of it. So good night, everyone, for tonight.